Shall we? Ah. The chief business of my life has always been to indulge my senses. I have never known anything of greater importance. I felt born for the fair sex, and have ever loved it dearly, and been loved by it as often and as much as possible. Likewise, I've always had a weakness for good living, and I have felt excited and passionate about every object that has excited my curiosity.
Now that I am but the shadow of the once brilliant Casanova, I love to chatter. Now that age has whitened my hair and deadened the ardor of my senses, my imagination does not take such a high flight, and I think differently. What embitters my old age is that, having a heart as warm as ever, I have no longer the strength necessary to secure a single day as blissful as those which I owe to this charming girl.
I love women. I don't think I have the slightest inclination to get married.
When I recall these events, I grow young again and feel once more the delights of youth, despite the long years which separate me from those happy times. But now that I'm getting into my dotage, I look on the dark side of everything. I am invited to a wedding and I see nothing but gloom. And witnessing the coronation of Leopold II at Prague, I say to myself, Nullo coronari, cursed old age. Thou art only worthy of dwelling in hell.
Casanova. We remember him as a great lover of women, but he was so much more than that. A magician, an astrologer, a low-life scoundrel, a terrible snob, a spy for governments, a secret Freemason, a Kabbalist, a servant, a prolific writer. He was rich and poor, a millionaire that lost everything and made it back again, many times over. This is the story of Casanova, as he called it himself, the history of my life. In April 1725, Giacomo Casanova is born in the city of Venice. June 1798, Casanova dies at the Duke's Palace in Duchkov. He is buried in the chapel of Santa Barbara. Many years later, his body is dug up and moved, never to be found.
The longer I live, the more interest I take in my papers. They are the treasures which attaches me to life and makes death more hateful still. And so in the end, through my memoirs, these letters are my life. But I know full well that the end, even of my cherished memories, is not far distant.
Few people have lived a life like that of Giacomo Casanova. Yet at his funeral on the 7th of June 1798, only one distant relative attended the burial at the Santa Barbara Chapel. He was buried overlooking the lake, far away from his homeland in Italy. His extraordinary life and memory would have been lost to history if it wasn't for historians, writers and professors that managed to salvage the papers and letters of ladies that Casanova once loved. In 1899, an English poet named Arthur Symons came to Duchkov to find out what happened to the papers that Casanova had left behind in Dux.
During all this time, people have been discussing the authenticity and the truthfulness of the memoirs. They have been searching for information about Casanova in various directions, and yet hardly anyone has ever taken the trouble or obtained the permission to make a careful examination in precisely the one place where information was most likely to be found. The greater part of the manuscripts were in Casanova's handwriting, which I could see gradually beginning to get shaky with years. Then there were many big bundles of letters addressed to him, dating over more than 30 years. Almost all the rest was in his own handwriting.
In July 1792, Casanova wrote that he'd arrived at the 12th volume. In the memoirs themselves we read,
The various adventures which, at the age of 72 years, impel me to write these memoirs.
written probably during a revision in 1797 at the beginning of one of the 2 chapters of the last volume, which were missing until discovered by Arthur Symons whilst at Dux in 1899.
The library, which was formed or at least arranged, by Casanova, and which remains as he left it, contains some 25,000 volumes, some of them of considerable value.
Then Simmons found a box with hundreds of letters. He had no time to make copies himself, but he realised that he'd hit a treasure trove and writes about it full of enthusiasm.
They come from Venice, Paris, Rome, Prague, Beirut, The Hague, Genoa, Fiume, Trieste, etc., and are addressed to as many places, often poste restante. Many are letters from women, some in beautiful handwriting on thick paper, others on scraps of paper in painful hands, ill-spelt. A countess writes pitifully imploring help. One protests her love in spite of the many chagrins he has caused her. Another asks how they are to live together. Another laments that a report has gone about that she is secretly living with him, which may harm his reputation. Some are in French, more in Italian. Mon cher Giacometto, writes one woman in French. Carissimo a amatissimo, writes another in Italian. There are a great many letters dating from 1779 to 1786, signed Francesca Buscini. They are written in Italian, and one of them begins, Unico mio vero amico, my only true friend. In another letter, ill-spelt, be assured that evil tongues, vapors, calumny, nothing can change my heart, which is yours entirely, and has no will to change its master. Now it seems to me that these letters must be from Manon Belletti, and that they are the letters referred to in the 6th volume of the memoirs. We read how on Christmas Day 1759, Casanova receives a letter from Manon in Paris, announcing her marriage with Monsieur Blondel, architect of the king and member of his academy. She returns him his letters and begs him to return hers, or burn them. But however this may be, I was fortunate enough to find the set of letters which I was most anxious to find, the letters from Henriette, whose loss every writer on Casanova has lamented. Henriette, it will be remembered, makes her first appearance at Cesena in the year 1748. After their meeting at Geneva, she reappears romantically apropos 22 years later at Aix in Provence, and she writes to Casanova proposing un commerce épistolaire, asking him what he has done since his escape from prison, and promising to do her best to tell him all that has happened to her during the long interval. After quoting her letter, he adds, I replied to her, accepting the correspondence that she offered me, and telling her briefly all my vicissitudes. She related to me in turn, in some 40 letters, all the history of her life. If she dies before me, I shall add these letters to these memoirs. But today she is still alive, and always happy, though now old. And I am inclined to think that she survived Casanova, for one of the letters is dated Beirut 1798, the year of Casanova's death. Does it not suggest a view of Casanova, not quite the view of all the world? To me it shows the real man, who perhaps of all others best understood what Shelley meant when he said,
True love in this differs from gold or clay, that to divide is not to take away.
Having spent his last years writing his memoirs, The History of My Life, they are finally published in 1823 in an expurgated version by the publishers Brockhaus. Many of his letters and papers left lying in the palace. In 1973, Dutch Casanovist Marco Lieflang found by chance in one of Waldstein's libraries a book bound in an undiscovered letter written by Casanova. The letter revealed the name of one of Casanova's most famous lovers. Previously only known as M.M., as Casanova tried to protect her identity, her name was Matilda. Because of the difficulty to see the originals of the Casanova archive, Marco Lieflang, the Dutch enthusiast of Casanova, has tried to form a shadow archive of copies and transcriptions, which can be handled by anybody who calls on the museum at Dux. The showpiece of the Shadow Archive is a photocopy of the manuscript of the memoirs lent by the owner, the publisher Brockhaus, who carefully keeps the original locked away at Wiesbaden. It arrived in 1998 at the bicentennial commemoration of Casanova's death. After 200 years, the manuscript and Casanova's letters have come home again. Casanova was born in Venice, Italy on the 2nd of April 1725. His father Gaetano was an actor in the Venetian theatre, and his mother Zanetta Farusi fell in love and married him secretly, only informing her widowed mother Marzia afterwards. A year after Giacomo was born, the Casanovas left for London. His parents joined a touring theatre group, and grandmother Marzia, having pardoned her daughter, looked after baby Giacomo.
His mother wasn't there. She was an actress. She worked in London. She worked in Dresden. Well, anyway, she was away, and Casanova was educated at home by his grandmother.
In London, Giovanni, Casanova's brother, was born. He later became a famous painter. 3 more children were born in Venice. Father Gaetano died when Giacomo was 8 years old. Grandma took care of the children when Zanetta played her roles on faraway stages. In the meanwhile, she paved the road for Giacomo's education. He became a student at the Padua University, studying moral philosophy, chemistry, mathematics and law. However, the library at Padua University had many other books, which were works on magic, the occult and the Kabbalah. Casanova read them all, filling his mind with more immoral ideas of fantasy. Books about erotica also exerted a major influence on him.
And they tried to give him a decent job. And if you were poor, there was only really one way to do it. No, 2 ways. You could try to get into the army or get into the church. And for Casanova, it was going to be the church.
In 1739, Casanova returned to Venice to become an abbate, received into the church in the early stages of becoming a priest. However, he met 76-year-old Venetian senator Elvis Gaspero Malipiero, one of the most powerful men in the city. He lived in a beautiful palace on the Venetian Canal and had over 20 mistresses. It was into the world of good wine and beautiful women that Casanova entered. The aging senator introduced the handsome man to women for whom he could no longer pleasure. A poor boy needed a wealthy patron, and there were over 12,000 servants in the city, 20,000 beggars and over 40,000 women who provided services to the wealthy merchants. Casanova made sure he always looked his best.
And there is a wonderful story that someday in Venice he was going to preach in a church on San Samuele, very near where he was born, and next to the palace of Senator Malipiero. And Casanova was already a nice-looking, nice-speaking guy who attracted the attention of a lot of girls. And he had the chance to give a sermon one day in the church of San Samuele, and it went fine. So fine that the next Sunday there were more people. There was a crowd because they wanted to see this new miracle of a priest. And Casanova did his best to produce something nice, but he was invited to lunch before the sermon. And this was a nice lunch, and he had wine, and another glass of wine, and another glass of wine. So that when the time came that he had to deliver his sermon, he got up in the pulpit of San Samuele, and then suddenly his eyesight blurred. What am I going to talk about? He couldn't remember a thing. I thought, the only thing I can do now to get a way out is to pretend I'm fainting.
Casanova's newfound position as a member of the clergy gave him access to the Italian aristocracy and an invitation from the Countess Monterel to her estate north of Venice. This was Casanova's first encounter with the beautiful daughter of the gatekeeper, Lucia. She visited him in his room and he persuaded her to lie in his bed. But what could become of her at the hands of a future priest? He later claimed that he was not in love with her, but Lucia would not make love to him. It was friends of hers, two sisters, Nanette and Maton, who visited Casanova's bed.
What sweet recollections that the villa has left in my memory. It seemed that I saw my divine love for the first time. Our looks were full of ardent love. Our hearts beat in concert with the most tender impatience. The hand of love seemed to have prepared on purpose for mysteries of a secret worship. We did not exchange one word. Our hearts spoke the same language. 2 whole hours were devoted to the most delightful, loving ecstasies. At last, we exclaimed together in mutual ecstasy. O love, we thank thee.
Casanova had made his first conquest with 2 women. He had begun his long career as a great lover. Casanova's attention now turned to one of the most famous courtesans in Venice, Giulietta, known as the Cleaner because her father was a street sweeper. She was 17 years old and very beautiful. The Marchese Sanfratelli, a statesman in Venice, paid her £10,000 for her pleasures. Then there was his new mistress, Teresa. One evening he came home to find Casanova in bed with Teresa. He took out his cane and whipped Casanova and threw him out of the house. Casanova had learnt his lesson, but he had a new acquired taste for good food, high society, and beautiful women. However, it was his superior, including his mother, that decided he should enter a seminary for priests, the Seminary San Capriano.
He went to a seminary and had his formal education to become a priest. He never really became one. Not that far, but the first steps were taken, and he was an abbé.
It was at this time that he was offered his first paying job as secretary to Bishop Bernardo de Bernardis. Casanova set off to Rome to take up his new appointment. But stopping at Padua, he had his first exposure to gambling and prostitutes. He met a monk who invited him to a brothel. There he had the pleasure of a young woman. Later he attended a gambling table and lost £300. Thus began Casanova's main interests, gambling and loose women. In his lifetime, he won and lost several £1 million.
He loved gambling. He was, until late in his life, I think he was really addicted to gambling and to helping the game also a bit. I think he, at times, learned to cheat while playing cards.
Casanova came across a Greek slave girl whom he made love to. Her owner, a Turk, offered her for sale to him for £1,000, but he had no money to pay the fee. Saddened, he continued on to Rome. When Casanova arrived in Rome, he was given an apartment in the Cardinal Acquaviva's palace. He twice had an audience with Pope Benedict XIV. With the Pope's approval, it gave him access to the highest of Roman society. He met with the Castelli family and their daughter Lucrezia, whom along with her sister he spied through the keyhole.
I watched through the keyhole and saw the 2 sisters come into their room. Then my two beauties, their door once locked, completed their night toilet, which in that fortunate climate is similar to the costume of our first mother. Lucretia, knowing that I was waiting to come in, told her sister to lie down on the side towards the window, and the Virgin, having no idea that she was exposing her most secret beauties to my profane eyes, crossed the room in a state of complete nakedness. Happy moments which I can no longer enjoy, but the sweet remembrance of which death alone can make me lose. I believe I never undressed myself as quickly as I did that evening. I open the door and fall into the arms of my Lucretia, who says to her sister,
"It is my angel, my love. Never mind him and go to sleep."
What a delightful picture I could offer to my readers if it were possible for me to paint voluptuousness in its most enchanting colors. What ecstasies of love from the very onset. What delicious raptures succeed each other until the sweetest fatigue made us give way to the soothing influence of Morpheus. The first rays of the sun, piercing through the crevices of the shutters, wake us out of our refreshing slumbers, and like two valorous knights who have ceased fighting only to renew the contest with increased valor, we lose no time in giving ourselves up to all the intensity of the flame which consumes us.
Did you remark with what candour I secured for us 2 hours of delightful tête-à-tête, and a tête-à-tête in a vis-à-vis too? How clever love is.
Yes. Darling, love has made but one of our two souls. I adore you. And if I have the courage to pass so many days without seeing you, it is only to be rewarded by the freedom of one single day like this.
I did not think it possible, but you have managed it all very well. You know too much for your age, dearest.
A month ago, I was but an ignorant child. And you are the first woman who has initiated me into the mysteries of love. Your departure would kill me, for I could not find another woman like you in all Italy.
What? Am I your first love? Alas, you will never be cured of it. Oh, why am I not entirely your own? You are also the first true love of my heart, and you will be the last. Great will be the happiness of my successor. I should not be jealous of her, but what suffering would be mine if I thought that her heart was not like mine.
Lucretia, seeing my eyes wet with tears, began to give way to our own, and seating ourselves on the grass, our lips drank our tears amidst the sweetest kisses. How sweet is the nectar of the tears shed by love, when that nectar is relished amidst the raptures of mutual ardor. I have often tasted them, those delicious tears, and I can say knowingly that the ancient physicians were right, and that the modern are wrong.
Casanova was not uncompassionate in his dealings with women. He allowed a pregnant lady who had collapsed at the front door of his palace to sleep in his bed. But the rumour soon spread that Casanova had, in fact, made her pregnant. The cardinal, afraid of his reputation, removed him from the house and requested him to travel to Constantinople. Casanova presented his letter to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and was invited to the house of Yusuf Ali.
Do you know, I don't think I have the slightest inclination to get married.
What? Oh, well then I must believe that you are not a perfect man, or that you intend to work out your own damnation. Unless you choose to tell me that your Christianity is outward.
I am a man in the very strongest sense of the word. And I am a true Christian. And I must also confess that I love women. I have not the slightest idea of depriving myself of the most delightful of all pleasures.
According to your faith, damnation awaits you.
I feel certain of the contrary, for when we confess our sins, our priests are obliged to give us absolution.
It was a turning point in Casanova's life. He would never involve himself in the priesthood again. This time, he entered the army.
Casanova was more or less a soldier for a certain period, and not so much that he was in the army, that he was in command or was under command of somebody, but he liked to have a fancy uniform, so he had one made. Of no army at all, he was general of his own army, one-man army.
Casanova, through his Vatican contacts, was appointed to Giacomo da Riva, governor of the Venetian galleys.
In Corfu, he landed from sea at a place where, on a very nice beach, where there was one chapel. A chapel where girls who wanted to become mother went to pray and to ask for a good fruit. And there Casanova collected some sort of an army of about 6 or 7 shepherds around him. He paid them something to keep curious people out of the way. And that's the closest that Casanova has come to really being in the army.
Whilst in Corfu, Casanova contracted syphilis. It took him many weeks to recover, having obtained the dreaded mercury treatments, the only known effective cure. Casanova returned to Venice during the month of the Carnival. There he sat in Venice's most famous cafes, in the Piazza San Marco. Casanova met and engaged a troupe of actors and began gambling and womanizing. By the end of the month, he had lost everything at the gambling tables and was penniless. Broke and disillusioned, he joined an orchestra playing violin at the San Samuel Theatre. His social position had collapsed, and he eked out an existence on a low wage. But fate followed Casanova once again. He was hired to play violin with the orchestra at a ball of an aristocrat who had married earlier that day. Just before dawn, Casanova was leaving the palace when he saw a red-robed senator climbing into a gondola. He had collapsed and was holding his shoulder. He was having a stroke. Casanova ran to the nearest coffee house to find a surgeon. In the gondola, the surgeon bled the senator and they took him to his palace in Santa Marina.
Taking everything upon myself, I ordered a servant to hurry out for a physician who came in a short time and ordered the patient to be bled again, thus approving the first bleeding prescribed by me. An hour later, 2 noblemen, friends of the senator, came in. They were in despair. They had inquired about the accident from the gondoliers, and having been told that I knew more than they did, they loaded me with questions which I answered.
Did you? You don't know? Well, why are you here? Did you? It's worse than we were told. What happened? How did he get in such a position? Why is he there now? Why is he in such a bad way?
I don't know!
They did not know who I was and did not like to ask me, whilst I thought it better to preserve a modest silence. The patient did not move. His breathing alone showed that he was still alive. All visitors were sent away by my advice, and the 2 noblemen and myself were the only persons in the sick man's room.
So if you have any other business, I suggest you go. We both shall attend the patient now on a mattress by his bed.
Sir, I will remain near his bed. If I went away, this patient will die, and he will live as long as I'm near him.
This sententious answer struck them with astonishment, as I expected it would, and they looked at each other in great surprise.
He always had an interest in medicine. He managed to stay in the house of Bragadin, and to perform some miracles with Kabbalah, some secret science. And Bragadin recovered and got the idea that it was Casanova and his hocus pocus that made him recover. So Casanova, without saying so, has been promoted the savior of Bragadin.
Whoever you may be, I am indebted to you for my life. Your first protectors wanted to make you a priest, a doctor, an advocate, a soldier, and ended making a fiddler of you. Those persons did not know you. God had evidently instructed your guardian angel to bring you to me. I know you and appreciate you. If you will be my son, you have only to acknowledge me for a father and for the future. Until my death, I will treat you as my own child. Your apartment is ready. You may send your clothes. You shall have a servant, a gondola at your orders, my own table, and 10 sequins a month. It is the sum I used to receive from my father when I was your age. You need not think of the future. Think only of enjoying yourself. Take me as your advisor in everything that may happen to you, in everything you may wish to undertake, and you may be certain of always finding me, your friend. My son, my dear son.
Such is the history of my metamorphosis, and of the lucky stroke which, taking me from the vile profession of a fiddler, raised me to the rank of a grandee.
Casanova moved into the senator's mansion. He was given his own apartment, his own gondola, and a monthly allowance.
It was not only Bragadin, there were 2 other friends, 3 old men sitting together there in this. Mr. Barbaro, Mr. Dandolo, and Bragadin.
My son, my son.
Casanova stayed there for quite a long time. And Bragadin wasn't real wealthy. He had a nice palace, he had a nice job as a senator, but no money. But whatever money he had, he shared it with Casanova, and he gave him a sort of weekly allowance on which Casanova could more or less live. And the rest of it, Casanova tried to find by gambling.
Returning to the gambling tables, Casanova lost a large sum of money. But one night, luck was on his side. While he was romancing a young lady in one of the gambling dens, she dropped a diamond earring. And when she left the next morning, Casanova took it to a pawnbroker and made a tidy sum. As Casanova crossed St. Mark's Square, he spotted a beautiful girl and an elderly priest. He went over to offer his assistance. They informed him that they were taking a gondola to Mestre, and the girl, Christine, was in fact the priest's niece and was in search of her husband. Casanova offered to guide them.
We proceeded towards the church, and I offered my arm to the niece, who, not knowing whether she ought to accept it or not, said to me,
"Do you suppose I cannot walk alone?"
I have no such idea, but if I do not offer you my arm, people will think me wanting in politeness.
Then I will take it. But now that I have your arm, what will people think?
Perhaps that we love each other and make a very nice couple.
And if anyone should inform your mistress that we're in love with each other, or even that you've given your arm to a young girl?
I have no mistress, and I shall have none in future, for I could not find a girl as pretty as you in all Venice.
Well, I'm very sorry for you, for we cannot afford to go again to Venice. And even if we could, how could we remain there 6 months?
As the day progressed, an extraordinary flirtation developed, and Casanova half considered proposing to her.
You said 6 months were necessary to know a girl well.
I would willingly defray all your expenses.
Indeed. Then say so to my uncle, and he'll think it over. For I cannot stay here alone.
Of course. In 6 months, you'll know me well.
Oh, I know you very well already.
Could you accept a man like me?
Why not?
And will you love me?
Yes, very much indeed when you are my husband.
I looked at the young girl with astonishment. She seemed to me a princess in the disguise of a peasant girl.
Casanova suggested that they take 2 rooms. The priest suggested that 2 beds in 1 room would suffice. Casanova did not know what to think, whether the priest was mad, perverted, or just playing a strange game with him.
My uncle's gone. I didn't hear him.
Dearest Christine, you are more lovely than one of God's angels. I have a great longing to give you a kiss.
If you long to give me a kiss, dear friend, come and give me one.
I jumped out of my bed. Decency made her hide her face. It was cold and I was in love. I find myself in her arms by one of those spontaneous movements which sentiment alone can cause. We belong to each other without ever having thought of it. She happy and rather confused, I delighted yet unable to realize the truth of a victory won without any contest. An hour passed in the midst of happiness, during which we forgot the whole world. Calm followed the stormy gusts of passionate love. Christine was the first to break the silence.
What have we just done?
We've become husband and wife.
What will my uncle say in the morning?
He need not know anything about this until he has given us the nuptial benediction in his own church.
And when will he do so?
And we've made all the arrangements necessary for a public marriage.
Well, how long will that be?
About a month.
We can't be married during Lent.
I will obtain permission.
You do not deceive me.
No, for I adore you.
Then you no longer want to know me better.
No, for I know you thoroughly now. And I feel certain that you'll make me happy.
And will you make me happy too?
I hope so.
He has certainly here, he has many facets. It's like a diamond with many facets. And you turn it and another facet is going to blink. But not everybody here would get entrance to his heart, I suppose.
The very next day, I resolved on ensuring Christine's happiness without making her my wife. I had thought of marrying her when I loved her better than myself, but after obtaining possession, the balance was so much on my side that my self-love proved stronger than my love for Christine. I could not make up my mind to renounce the advantages, the hopes which I thought were attached to my happy independence. Yet I was the slave of sentiment. I was aware that she was perhaps bearing in her womb a living token of our mutual love, and I shivered at the bare possibility that her confidence in me might be repaid by shame and everlasting misery. I bethought myself of finding her a husband, in every other way better than myself. A husband so good that she would not only forgive me for the insult I should thus be guilty of towards her, but also thank me at the end, and like me all the better for my deceit.
Shut up in a room with the 3 worshippers of my oracle, Bragadin, Dandolo, and Barbaro, I consulted Paralis upon the affair which I had so much at heart. The answer was Serenus must attend to it.
Serenus?
Serenus was the Kabbalistic name of the old Senator Bragadin, and the excellent man immediately expressed himself ready to execute all the orders of Paralis. It was my duty to inform him of those orders. The oracle went on to say that he was to appoint Dandolo to scout for a husband.
Sometime later, Dandolo did find a suitable husband for Christine, a young Venetian named Charles. The marriage which Bragadin and Casanova attended took place the following week. The old priest carried out the marriage vows. And so it was. Casanova was born into humble beginnings in Venice. Educated at Padua University, he found an interest in the books on the macabre and erotic. His early encounters with high society with the benefit and good fortune of embracing a life in the church by becoming a priest. Although fate had something else in store for Casanova, losing his virginity to two sisters, his future in the church was extinguished. But through his benefactor, Senator Bragadin, he was reborn into high society, and a new life of gambling and seduction began.
Think only of enjoying yourself. Take me as your advisor in everything that may happen to you, and you may be certain of always finding me your friend.
I'm not sure if Casanova was himself somebody everyone would like.
Could you accept a man like me?
Oh, well then I must believe that you are not a perfect man.
My spirit is strong enough to resist even so fatal a blow, for I know I have a friend in you.
At least tell me, madam, whether the captain is your husband or your father. I flatter myself I can convince her to sacrifice that lover for me.
It is my most ardent wish, and to realize it, I am ready to do anything.
Absolutely divine. I knew you'd give in.
One.
And so it was. Casanova was born into humble beginnings in Venice. Educated at Padua University, he found an interest in the books on the macabre and erotic. His early encounters with high society with the benefit and good fortune of embracing a life in the church by becoming a priest. Although fate had something else in store for Casanova, losing his virginity to two sisters, his future in the church was extinguished. But through his benefactor, Senator Bragadin, he was reborn into high society, and a new life of gambling and seduction began.
Think only of enjoying yourself. Take me as your advisor in everything that may happen to you, and you may be certain of always finding me your friend.
I'm not sure if Casanova was himself somebody everyone would like.
Could you accept a man like me?
Oh, well then I must believe that you are not a perfect man.
If you would show any sign of disrespect, any sign of not taking him serious, I think you would be out. On the other hand, if he had people whom he liked, his friends were real good friends.
My spirit is strong enough to resist even so fatal a blow, for I know I have a friend in you.
At least tell me, madam, whether the captain is your husband or your father. I flatter myself I can convince her to sacrifice that lover for me.
It is my most ardent wish, and to realize it, I am ready to do anything.
Absolutely divine. I knew you'd give in.
At the opera, Casanova met a dancer named Marina. He'd met her once before in Corfu. He went to a house for dinner where he met her lover, who called himself Count Selly, but he wasn't actually a count. He was a gambler, and he was in a bad mood. He called Marina a prostitute, to which she replied, "Yes, and for you are my procurer." With that, he threw a knife at her face, but missed. He chased after Marina. Casanova took out his dagger and said, "Stop, or you're a dead man." He and Marina left. Casanova and Selly agreed to meet the next day to settle this dispute. Marina told Casanova that he was in fact a pimp and rented her out to his friends for money. The next day, Casanova arrived at the appointed venue to meet with the Count.
The Count had not yet arrived. I entered the coffee room to wait for him. I met a good-looking Frenchman there, and I addressed him. Being pleased with his conversation, I told him that I expected the arrival of a man, and that as my honor required that he should find me alone, I would be very grateful if he would go away as soon as I saw the man approaching. The Count came in with his follower, who was sporting a sword at least 40 inches long, and had all the look of a cutthroat. "I do not cross swords with a dancer," said the cutthroat. He had scarcely uttered these words when my friend, going up to him, told him that a dancer was certainly as good as a blackleg, and gave him a violent blow with the flat of his sword on the face. I followed his example with Selly, who began to beat a retreat, and said that he only wanted to tell me something, and that he would fight afterwards. "Well, speak. You know me, and I do not know you. Tell me who you are." My only answer was to resume laying my sword upon this scoundrel, while the Frenchman was showing the same dexterity upon the back of his companion. But the two cowards took to their heels, and there was nothing for us to do but to sheathe our weapons. Thus did the duel end, in a manner even more amusing than Marina herself had anticipated.
The Frenchman, whom he had discovered was Antonio Belletti, ended up with Marina.
I hate old age. It offers only what I already know. Age has calmed my passions by rendering them powerless. But my heart has not grown old. My memory has kept all the freshness of youth. No. I have not forgotten Henriette.
Casanova's greatest love in his memoirs is Henriette. And it starts in a weird way. Casanova is in a hotel in Cesena and he hears a lot of noise in the next room. What happens? He is curious, so he wants to go and know more about it. He goes and looks and sees there is the police of the Inquisition bouncing on the door of the next room because they have got air that there is somebody in the room, a man sleeping with a girl who is not the wife, which was forbidden by the Pope. Well, Casanova interferes. He finds that there is an old Hungarian officer with a young Hungarian officer, at least, dressed like one, but apparently later on it will prove to be Henriette. Henriette, to make the story a bit shorter, is running away from home. She says, "My husband and my father-in-law are monsters." So she eloped from somewhere with this Hungarian officer. They have trouble in communicating because the Hungarian speaks Hungarian and Latin, no French. And Henriette speaks French and no Hungarian and no Latin.
Taking the opportunity to spend some time with her, he offered the services of his carriage to her and her companion.
But my business was in reference to a carriage, for the one I had boasted of existed only in my imagination.
So what did you do?
I went to the most fashionable coffee house, and as good luck would have it, heard that there was a traveling carriage for sale, which no one would buy because it was too expensive. I, like a fool, bought it. Using somebody else's money, of course.
At least tell me, madam, whether the captain is your husband or your father.
Neither one nor the other.
Henriette could not open her lips without my discovering some fresh perfection. For her wit delighted me even more than her beauty, and it seemed evident to me that she would not be sorry to exchange her elderly lover for me.
Something being the matter with the carriage, we stopped at Forlì to have it repaired. After a very cheerful supper, I retired to my room to go to bed, thinking of nothing else but that very charming woman by whom I was so completely captivated. On the journey, Henrietta struck me as so strange that I would not sleep in the second bed in their room, lest she should leave her old comrade and come to my bed to sleep with me. And I did not know how the worthy captain would take such a joke.
Didn't you want her?
Of course. I wanted to possess that lovely creature. But I wanted everything to be settled amicably, for I had a certain respect for the old brave officer.
As for the captain, I felt certain that from what he had told me that he would not be angry with me if I risked a declaration, for as a sensible man he could only assume a neutral position. When I was ready, I repaired to the chamber occupied by my two traveling companions. And after paying each of them the usual morning compliments, I told the officer that I was deeply in love with Henriette, and I asked him whether he would object to my trying to obtain her as my mistress.
The reason for which she begs you to leave her in Parma and not to take any further notice of her must be that she hopes to meet some lover of hers there. Let me have half an hour's conversation with her, and I flatter myself I can convince her to sacrifice that lover for me. If she refuses me, I will remain here. You will go with her to Parma while you leave my carriage, only sending me the receipt so that I might collect it whenever I please.
As soon as breakfast is over, I shall go and visit the Institute and leave you alone with Henriette. I hope you may succeed, for I should be happy to see her under your protection when I part with her. Should she persist in her first resolve, then I could easily find a vetturino here, and you could keep your carriage. I thank you for your proposal, and it will grieve me to leave you.
Thank you.
Highly pleased at having accomplished half of my task, and at seeing myself near the denouement, I asked the lovely Frenchwoman whether she would like to see the sights of Bologna.
I should like it very much.
The captain was continuing his journey on the one way, and Casanova went with her to Parma. He found out that she was a very pretty girl, and in the first shop of good fashion, he bought a wonderful robe for her, dressed her up as a girl, and, well, it was a miracle to see how she changed from a handsome officer to a wonderful young lady.
Sooth to say, I fell at her feet, and lovingly pressing her knees, kissed them repeatedly with raptures of joy and gratitude. No more furore, no more bitter words. They do not suit the sweetest of all human emotions. Loving, docile, tender. I swear never to beg for anything, not even to kiss her hand, until I have shown myself worthy of her precious love. The heavenly creature delighted to see me pass so rapidly from despair to lively tenderness, whispers in a voice that breathes of love, to come up from my knees.
Her emotion and charm, which seemed to flow from her lips to enforce conviction, made me shed tears of love and sympathy. I blended her tears with those falling from her beautiful eyes. I promised not to abandon her and to make her the sharer of my fate. I felt really disposed to make her happy. I could not believe that I inspired in her a very deep passion.
Am I not then always the same?
No. Heavenly creature. And it is so true that you are no longer the same in my eyes that I could now use any familiarity towards you.
Those that believe that a woman is incapable of keeping a man happy equally all the 24 hours have never known a woman such as Henriette. The joy that flooded my soul was far greater when I conversed with her during the day than when she lay in my arms at night. A beautiful woman without a mind of her own leaves a man with no resource after he has physically enjoyed her charms. An ugly woman of great intelligence will make him fall so deeply in love that she leaves him feeling no unsatisfied desires. So what must I have been? For Henriette was intelligent, beautiful, and cultured.
You are lucky indeed to have loved in that way.
It's impossible to describe the extent of my happiness.
They travel together for a while, and Casanova manages to take the place of the Hungarian officer. Intrigued by Henriette, Casanova falls very, very deeply in love with her. He says the nights with her were wonderful, but the days, her conversation, what she did, her culture, that was really the end. And he is much impressed about her playing the cello. And she didn't play the cello the prude way with the legs together and the cello left from her, but with the cello between her legs. And she was reprimanded for it at the convent because this was an obscene way to play for a girl. Mr. André in Aix found also a picture of Henriette, a huge family picture with two girls, Henriette and the little sister on it, and in the corner the cello with an angel with one finger pointing at Henriette, and the interpretation is that she is playing this machine, and on the other finger on the lips saying, she's not playing like this, but she's playing like that. We don't know, of course. It's an interpretation, but a nice one.
Age has calmed my passions by rendering them powerless. But my heart has not grown old. My memory has kept all the freshness of youth. No, I have not forgotten Henriette.
For even now, when my head is covered with white hair, the recollection of her is still a source of happiness in my heart. What embitters my old age is that, having a heart as warm as ever, I have no longer the strength necessary to secure a single day as blissful as those which I owed to this charming girl.
Henriette had already asked Casanova to keep a low profile because, well, it looked as if she was fearing something would happen there, someone would recognize her. And of course, this happened. There was a talk between her and a gentleman in the court of Parma, and that made Henriette sad, and she said to Casanova, "I believe this is going to be the end of our voyage, because I have been recognized. This gentleman you saw yesterday has told me that I should come home from where I came, and that I should pick up my old life again." She had never told Casanova that there was an old life. They had a very sad night, shedding tears for having to end this love.
It is I, dearest and best friend, who have been compelled to abandon you. But do not let your grief be increased by any thought of my sorrow. Let us be wise enough to suppose that we have had a happy dream, and not to complain of destiny. For never did so beautiful a dream last for so long. Let us be proud of the consciousness that for 3 months we gave one another the most perfect felicity. Few human beings can boast of so much. Let us swear never to forget one another, and to often remember the happy hours of our love, in order to renew them in our souls, which, although divided, will enjoy them as acutely as if our hearts were beating one against the other. Do not make any inquiries about me, and if chance should let you know who I am, forget it forever. I feel certain that you will be happy to hear that I have arranged my affairs so well that for the remainder of my life I shall be as happy as I can possibly be without you, dear friend, by my side. I do not know who you are, but I feel certain that nobody in this world knows you as well as I do.
I will always remember her. I recall now, even 40 years later, the last morning I spent with her. I had admired her lovely face, sleeping. All I knew of her came back to mind. The words that had been spoken by her bewitching mouth. Her rare talent, her candor, her feelings so full of delicacy, her misfortunes, everything had strengthened my resolution to make her the companion of my destiny, whatever it might be. I was determined to give our union the sanction of religion and law, and to take her legally to be my wife. But alas, life has many cruelties, and that is the death of love.
I shall not have another lover as long as I live. But I do not wish you to imitate me. Au contraire, I hope that you will love again. And I trust that a good fairy will bring along your path another Henriette. Farewell. Farewell.
Henriette, with her diamond ring, wrote in the window pane, "You'll forget Henriette also, one day." But Casanova didn't. And the next morning, she took a coach and said to Casanova, "You have to stay in the hotel. Don't follow me. You shouldn't know where I come from or where I go to." I'm very sorry that this story has to end now. Tonight, stay in your room, and tonight I'll send my coachman back with a letter to you. And that was the last what Casanova saw of Henriette in Geneva.
In Turin, he met an actress at the theatre to drown his sorrows. But he acquired a dose of gonorrhea and was confined to bed for several weeks. The doctors came and administered mercury. Casanova's attitude to venereal disease was that the disease might leave scars, but we are easily consoled when we consider that we gain them with pleasure, as soldiers take pride in seeing their scars. Casanova went through such pain and depression that on the advice of a priest he returned to pray in church to avoid women and gambling.
Senator Bragadin welcomed Casanova back into the palace with open arms, but it wasn't long before he was tempted back to the gambling tables and the charms of beautiful women. He also won a large sum of money on the lottery. His friend Belletti turned up in Venice with Marina. They were on the way to the Italian theatre in Paris, and they asked if Casanova would like to join them. He gladly accepted the invitation, and on their way they stopped off at Lyon.
It was in Lyon that Casanova made his most important step into the higher echelons of power and European aristocracy. It was here that he joined the world of Freemasonry. In a chamber, he was invoked into the secret society. He took on the mason's apron and under oath swore loyally to the secret society by pain of death. He drew blood from a ritual dagger. The world of Freemasonry gave him access to some of the most powerful men and women in Europe. It was his final break from the Catholic Church, who disapproved of members joining.
In Paris, Casanova stayed with his friend Belletti. He moved in high society and visited some of the best brothels in Paris. There he met the writer, Claude Pierre Patou, who took him to the most famous bordello in Paris, called Hôtel de Roule, that was run by Madame Paris. She looked after the girls, she fed them, gave them wine and a clean bed. When visitors arrived, they were checked by a servant and taken into a room where all the girls sat, dressed in white, sewing. They were small, large, blonde and brunette. Once a girl was chosen, they were taken upstairs for dinner. There, Casanova met a girl named Saint-Hilaire. He was so besotted by her. He visited her over 10 times, spending at least £500 on her charms. The writer Patou also introduced him to an Irish girl named Victoria O'Murphy, who had a sister named Louise O'Murphy, who soon would become subject to one of the most erotic paintings and would become mistress to King Louis XV. Casanova offered her thousands of pounds for her virginity, but she refused. Casanova, however, was still up to his amorous ways. He got his landlady's daughter Mimi pregnant. When Madame Quinson found out that Casanova was the father, she beat her daughter and immediately reported Casanova to the police, who was pulled up in front of the court. In his defence, Madame Quinson had sent Mimi to his room. The court agreed and Casanova was let off, and Madame Quinson was made to pay all the court fees. Mimi's child was born and Casanova took care of them both.
Tired of Paris, Casanova moved on to Vienna. However,
Casanova did not stay in Vienna for long. The Empress Marie Theresa had set up a commission of chastity in the interests of purity and health. Prostitutes and escorts seen walking the street or watched by 500 plain-clothed detectives. Many working girls would declare that they're on the way to church to pray and would use a rosary to prove their innocence. Casanova could not find any available women and decided to head back to Venice and to the world of the aging Senator Bragadin. On his journey, an incident occurred with a passing carriage.
Having therefore left Padua at the very instant of the fatality, I met at Oriago a cabriolet drawn at full speed by 2 post horses containing a very pretty woman and a man wearing a German uniform. Within a few yards from me, the vehicle was suddenly upset on the side of the river, and the woman, falling over the officer, was in great danger of rolling into the Brenta. I jumped out of my chaise without ever stopping my postilion, and rushing to the assistance of the lady, I remedied with a chaste hand the disorder caused to her toilet by a fall. Her companion, who had picked himself up and without any injury, hastened towards us, and there was a lovely creature sitting on the ground, thoroughly amazed, and less confused by her fall than from the indiscretion of her petticoats, which had exposed in all their nakedness certain parts which an honest woman never shows to a stranger. In the warmth of her thanks, which lasted till her postilion and mine had righted her carriage, she often called me our saviour, her guardian angel.
Casanova sparked up a brief relationship with the girl. It transpired that she was the mistress of her companion, the officer, who was in some financial trouble. He came to Casanova several times for financial aid, but Casanova refused the loan. Finally, Casanova agreed to meet the officer's family, promising himself this would be the last time he was bothered by this nuisance officer, but he was left dazzled by the officer's sister, Caterina. A few days later, the officer came back to Casanova, inviting him to the opera with him and his sister.
The scoundrel didn't mention his letters of exchange again, and as he saw I was no longer interested in his mistress, but was in love with his sister, formed the excellent project of selling her to me.
Certainly was a scoundrel.
Indeed. I pitied the mother and daughter who had put any confidence in that man. But I did not have the strength to resist the temptation. And I even went so far as to persuade myself that, as I was in love with her, it was my duty to accept the offer, to protect her from further snares. For if I had not accepted the offer, her brother might have offered her to some other man. And I could not stand that idea.
A noble intention.
I felt that in my company her innocence ran no risk. Afterwards, her brother told his sister that I was in love with her and that it would certainly please me if she allowed me to kiss her. Her only answer was to offer me her laughing lips, which seemed to call for kisses. I was burning, but my respect for her innocence was such that I just kissed her on the cheek, and that in a manner very cold in appearance. "Come, come," said the officer, "give her a good lover's kiss." I didn't move. The impudent fellow annoyed me. And then the sister turned her head sadly and said,
"Do not press him. I'm not so alluring as to please him."
That remark gave the alarm to my love. I could no longer master my feelings.
What? Beautiful Caterina, you do not presume to ascribe my reserve to the feeling you have inspired me with. You suppose you do not please me. If a kiss is all that is needed to prove the contrary to you, receive it now, with all the sentiment that is burning in my heart.
Then, folding her in my arms and pressing her lovingly against my breast, I imprinted on her mouth the long and ardent kiss which I had so much wished to give her. But the nature of that kiss made the timid dove feel that she had fallen into the vulture's claws. She escaped from my arms, amazed at having discovered my love in such a manner.
Now can you still doubt that I love you?
You have convinced me. Because you have undeceived me, you must not punish me.
The next day, the officer informed Casanova that Caterina had told her mother that they were in love, but he reassured Casanova that the mother was pleased with the relationship. However, the father, who did not know yet, was unlikely to be pleased with the news. Casanova kissed the mother's hand and told her that he would get a friend to speak to the father when he was in a comfortable position to look after Caterina. He managed to persuade Bragadin to speak to the father on his behalf. He spent the evening with Caterina and told her about Bragadin and his intention to ask for her hand in marriage.
My father thinks of me now as if I were nothing but a child. And his eyes are going to be opened respecting me. He will examine my conduct, and God knows what will happen. Now, we are happy, even more than we were during our visits to Zueka, for we can see each other every night without restraint. But what will my father do when he hears that I have a lover?
What can he do? If he refuses me your hand, I will carry you off, and the patriarch would surely marry us. We shall be one another's for life.
It is my most ardent wish, and to realise it I am ready to do anything. But dearest, I know my father.
The next day after dinner, her father called upon Monsieur de Bragadin, but I did not show myself. He remained a couple of hours with my 3 friends, and as soon as he had gone, I heard that his answer had been what the mother had told me, but with the addition of a circumstance most painful to me. Namely, that his daughter would pass the 4 years which were to elapse before she could think of marriage in a convent.
The story of CC and MM is just as interesting to anybody, but especially to Casanovas, as the story of Henriette. CC and MM were girls from Venice. Casanova first met CC, but we know who it was. It was Katina. And they made love, and Katina became pregnant. She wanted to conceal this, went into a convent and on the island of Murano, and from there on corresponded with Casanova. And he went as often as he could to Murano to attend Mass in the convent. So from behind the iron bars, Katrina could see him, and sometimes he could have a quick look and see Katina.
My servant brought to my room a woman who had a letter for me. I recognized at once the seal which I had given to Katerina. I thought I would drop down dead.
Before I can write all I have to say, I must be sure of my messenger. I am boarding in a convent, and I am very well treated, and I enjoy excellent health in spite of the anxiety of my mind. The superior has been instructed to forbid me all visitors and correspondence. I am, however, already certain of being able to write to you, notwithstanding these very strict orders. I entertain no doubt of your good faith, my beloved husband, and I feel sure that you will never doubt a heart which is wholly yours. Trust to me for the execution of whatever you may wish me to do, for I am yours and only yours. Answer only a few words until we are quite certain of our messenger.
In this convent also lived a girl indicated by Casanova as MM, and she became friends with Katina. And Katina appointed through the iron bars, that's him, that's my friend. And MM apparently thought, looks good. I must tell something about the background of MM, otherwise it's understandable. MM was a girlfriend with the French ambassador in Venice. While in the convent, something unheard of course, but she was. And apparently, for some reason, she had found a possibility of sneakily leaving the convent and go and see her French ambassador. The ambassador Berny, later he would be a cardinal, which makes it even more piquant, the story. This French envoyé had to go to Vienna and had to leave his mistress in Venice. and he hated to leave her, just like that. So he was a very practical man and had invited her to look around and see, wouldn't you find someone else who could take care of you, whom you would like to be with every now and then. And, M had heard from CC that there, looking through the bars, you could see on Sunday Casanova, and she thought, that's a nice guy. So she suggested to the ambassador, maybe this young boy, Casanova.
A nun who for the last 2 months and a half has seen you every Sunday in the convent of her church, wishes to become acquainted with you. I feel certain that you will answer me, and that you will feel how impatiently I am waiting for your letter. I entreat you, therefore, to give it to the same person with whom you will receive mine. You will find her 1 hour before the noon in the church of Saint Cancian, near the first altar on the right.
Casanova returned to the convent a few days later to ask to see MM. A nun told him that she was otherwise engaged for the rest of the day. Casanova was insulted, and having written MM a letter, he decided to put her out of his mind. It was purely by chance that 10 days later, he bumped into the courier that had been delivering his letters, and he told him that MM had replied. He giddily went back to the convent to see MM.
Our acquaintance has begun with a violent storm. Let us hope that we shall now enjoy it long, in perfect and lasting calm. This is the first time that we speak to one another, but what has occurred must be enough to give us a thorough knowledge of each other. I trust that our intimacy will be as tender as sincere, and that we shall know how to have a mutual indulgence for our faults.
Can such an angel as you have any?
Who is without them?
When shall I have the happiness of convincing you of my devotion with complete freedom and in all the joy in my heart?
We will take supper at my casino whenever you please, provided you give me notice 2 days beforehand. Or I could go and sup with you in Venice, if it will not disturb your arrangements.
It would only increase my happiness. I am in very easy circumstances, and far from fearing expense, I delight in it. All I possess belongs to the woman I love.
Such confidence, my dear friend, is very agreeable to me. The more so that I have likewise to tell you that I am very rich, and that I could not refuse anything to my lover.
You have a lover?
Yes, it is through him that I am rich, and he is entirely my master. I never conceal anything from him. The day after tomorrow, when I am alone with you, I will tell you more.
But I hope that your lover will not...
Will not be there? Certainly not. Have you a mistress?
I had one, but alas, she has been taken from me by violent means, and for the last 6 months I have led a life of complete celibacy.
Do you love her still?
I cannot think of her without loving her. She has almost as great charms and as great beauty as you. But I foresee that you will make me forget her.
If your happiness with her was complete, I pity you, for she has been violently taken away from you, and you shun society in order to feed your sorrows. I have guessed right, have I not? But if I happen to take possession of her place in your heart, no one, my sweet friend, no one will turn me out of it.
But what will your lover say?
He will be delighted to see me happy with such a lover as you. It is in his nature.
What an admirable nature. Such heroism is quite beyond me.
What sort of life do you lead in Venice?
I live in the theatres, in society, in the casinos, where I fight against fortune, sometimes with good, sometimes with bad success.
Do you visit foreign ambassadors?
No, for I'm too much acquainted with the nobility, but I know them all.
How do you know them if you do not see them?
I've known them abroad. In Parma, the Duke de Montalegre, the Spanish ambassador. In Vienna, I knew Count Rosenberg. In Paris, Monsieur Berny, about 2 years ago, the French ambassador to Venice.
It is nearly 12 o'clock, my sweet friend. Time for us to part. Come at the same hour the day after tomorrow, and I will give you all the instructions which you will require to enable you to come and sup with me.
Alone?
Of course.
There was a meeting in a house outside the convent where Casanova met this MM. And where they, well, not the first time, but very soon made love and had wonderful dinners, and, well, it was beautiful.
The relationship between Casanova and MM blossomed. He still wrote to Caterina, but his passion was now focused on MM. As the romance developed, MM wrote to Casanova, making an unexpected proposition.
Now, dearest, I have only this to say. Do you feel disposed to allow yourself to be seen by another man while you are abandoning yourself to the sweet voluptuousness of your senses? That doubt causes all my anxiety, and I entreat from you an answer, yes or no. Do you understand how painful the doubt is for me? I expect not to close my eyes throughout the night, and I shall not rest until I have your decision. In case you should object to show your tenderness in the presence of a third person, I will take whatever determination love may suggest to me. But I hope that you will consent. And even if you are not to perform a character of an ardent lover in a masterly manner, it would not be of any consequence. I will let my friend believe that your love has not yet reached its apogee. My friend is not yet at his post, but the moment he is there, I will give you a wink.
In the meanwhile, the French envoy hadn't departed yet. He wanted to meet Casanova too, but wanted to meet Casanova together with MM. And what he did was that in the house outside of the convent, he had in a room made a little hole in which he could spy and look at the next room.
Where is the mysterious closet?
There it is, behind that wall. There is a bed, a table, and everything necessary to a person who wants to spend the night amusing himself by looking at what is going on in this room. I will show it to you whenever you like.
One day, the Frenchman was sitting behind the hole, and MM said to Casanova, "My friend is behind there. Don't look at it now because he's there already. So let's just pretend that we don't know that he's there."
But if you play your part naturally, he will not feel any weariness.
I will be most natural, but more polite.
Oh, no politeness, I beg. For if you're polite, goodbye to nature. Wherever you have seen, I would like to know, two lovers excited by all the fury of love, think of politeness.
The clock striking 12, I showed her the principal actor who was longing to perform.
And then they made love in a very nice way. Casanova thought, well, he is looking there like a film director. I have to move like this so that he doesn't miss anything of the fun. And, well, when that was done, he heard through the hole, "Well done, my boy." Wonderful.
It wasn't long before Caterina discovered the affair between MM and Casanova. She noticed a ring on MM's finger, similar to the one that Casanova had bought her. Surprisingly, Caterina was very happy about this. And one evening, Casanova was letting himself into MM's room, for which he had his own key, and there stood Caterina, dressed as a nun. They spent all night talking, and Casanova was confused as to whether this was a setup. In his anger, Casanova left his key. Having narrowly avoided getting married, Casanova's heart was stolen by the mysterious Henriette, a woman for whom he would love like no other ever again.
As soon as breakfast is over, I shall go and visit the Institute and leave you alone with Henriette.
But we have to say goodbye to each other.
And I trust that a good fairy will bring along your path another Henriette.
He thinks he is going to die.
I was determined to give our union the sanction of religion and law, and to take her legally to be my wife. But alas, life has many cruelties, and that is the death of love.
It is my most ardent wish, and to realise that I am ready to do anything.
Such confidence, my dear friend, is very agreeable to me.
Your old girlfriend with the new girlfriend. Well, okay, 2 girlfriends, that's fine.
I'm pregnant, and I shall kill myself if I am found out.
This rich man wouldn't marry a pregnant girl.
The 100 guineas are at your disposal.
The degraded dupe of a vile prostitute.
Absolutely, Divine. Tomorrow morning, I shall ask you to come with me before the magistrate.
Having narrowly avoided getting married, Casanova's heart was stolen by the mysterious Henriette, a woman for whom he would love like no other ever again.
As soon as breakfast is over, I shall go and visit the Institute and leave you alone with Henriette.
But we have to say goodbye to each other.
And I trust that a good fairy will bring along your path another Henriette.
He thinks he is going to die.
I was determined to give our union the sanction of religion and law, and to take her legally to be my wife. But alas, life has many cruelties, and that is the death of love.
And for the last 6 months, I have led a life of complete celibacy.
It is my most ardent wish, and to realise that I am ready to do anything.
Such confidence, my dear friend, is very agreeable to me.
Your old girlfriend with the new girlfriend. Well, okay, 2 girlfriends, that's fine.
I'm pregnant, and I shall kill myself if I am found out.
This rich man wouldn't marry a pregnant girl.
The 100 guineas are at your disposal.
The degraded dupe of a vile prostitute.
Absolutely, Divine. Tomorrow morning, I shall ask you to come with me before the magistrate.
It was in 1973, on my first visit in this library, that I found this little booklet with the text of Casanova between all those books, and opened it and saw Casanova text outside, inside, and it was glued together. So there should be 2 more pages inside. What we find here is a first version of the memoirs, and exactly the episode of MM and CC. Here, Casanova writes the full name of CC, Catine, and has crossed it out, put CC on it. But MM is still in full. Here she is called Mathilde. This is a document that's the only thing in the world where you find these letters explained. CC is Catine, Capretti, we know that was a real girlfriend of Casanova, and Mathilde, MM. Wonderful. And I think when I found it, I was the first one in, well, maybe 100 years to have found a real Casanova text. 4 pages of the memoirs.
It wasn't long before Caterina discovered the affair between MM and Casanova. She noticed a ring on MM's finger, similar to the one that Casanova had bought her. Surprisingly, Caterina was very happy about this. And one evening, Casanova was letting himself into MM's room, for which he had his own key. And there stood Caterina, dressed as a nun. They spent all night talking, and Casanova was confused as to whether this was a setup.
One day, MM brought somebody else, brought CC. Casanova was flabbergasted. The old girlfriend.
The first thing I found in the parcel, which caused me great pleasure, was the key which she returned to me. I had already repented having given it up, and I was beginning to feel that I had been in the wrong. It acted like a refreshing balm upon me. The second thing, not less dear after the return of the precious key, was a letter from MM, the seal of which I was not long in breaking, and I read the following lines.
The particulars which you have read, or which you are going to read in the letter of my friend, will cause you, I hope, to forget the fault which I have committed so innocently, for I trusted, on the contrary, that you would be very happy. I saw all and heard all, and you would not have gone away without the key if I had not, most unfortunately, fallen asleep 1 hour before your departure. Take back the key and come to the casino tomorrow night, since heaven has saved you from the storm. Your love may, perhaps, give you the right to complain, but not to ill-treat a woman who certainly has not given you any mark of contempt.
I entreat you, dear husband, not to send back this key, unless you have become the most cruel of men, unless you find pleasure in tormenting 2 women who love you ardently and who love you for yourself only. Knowing your excellent heart, I trust you will go to the casino tomorrow evening and make it up with MM, who cannot go there tonight. You will see that you are in the wrong, dearest, and that far from despising you, my dear friend loves you only.
The old girlfriend with the new girlfriend. So at first he was angry. This was a setup. He was, this was unreal. But he also, being a very practical man, thought, well, okay, 2 girlfriends, that's fine. And they had a lot of fun together.
MM held a small party. Among its guests were Casanova, the French ambassador, MM's voyeur lover, and Caterina. After the meal, Casanova retired to MM's room, where MM and Caterina were waiting, the French ambassador to join them later.
Good evening, my 2 divinities. Where is our charming Frenchman?
MM was beginning to show some anxiety at the absence of the French ambassador. The doorkeeper brought her a letter from him saying that he was caught up with work that would prevent him from joining them.
Well, it is not his fault. We shall sup without him. Will you join us on Friday?
Yes, with the greatest pleasure. But what's the matter, dear Katerina? You look sad.
Sad, no. Unless it should be for the sake of my friend. For I've never seen a more polite and more obliging gentleman.
Very well, dear. I'm glad he has rendered you so sensible.
What do you mean? Could anyone be insensible to his merit?
Better still, but I agree with you. Only, tell me if you love him.
Well, even if I loved him, do you think that I'd go and tell him? Besides, I'm certain that he loves my friend.
So saying, she sat down on MM's knee, calling her her own little wife, and my two beauties began to bestow on one another caresses which made me laugh heartily. Far from troubling their sport, I excited them in order to enjoy a spectacle which I had long been acquainted.
Casanova began to suspect that this might have been an elaborate trap set up by MM, and that the French ambassador was probably far from working.
Your bosom must have become perfect in the last 9 months.
It is like mine. Would you like to see it for yourself?
Of course I did not refuse. MM unlaced her friend, who made no resistance, and performing afterwards the same office upon herself. In less than 2 minutes, I was admiring 4 rivals contending for the golden apple like the 3 goddesses, and which would have set at defiance the handsome Paris himself to adjudge the prize without injustice. Need I say what an ardent fire that ravishing sight sent coursing through my veins? I showed them the Académie des Dames, and pointed out a certain position to MM, who, understanding my wishes, said to Katerina,
Would you, darling, represent that group with me?
A look of compliance was Katerina's only answer. She was not yet inured to amorous pleasures as much as her lovely teacher. While I was laughing with delight, the 2 friends were getting ready, and in a few minutes we were all 3 in bed and in a state of nature. At first satisfied with enjoying the sight of the barren contest of my 2 bacchanalians, I was amused by their efforts, but soon excited myself and consumed by all the fire of voluptuousness, I threw myself upon them, and I made them, one after the other, almost faint away with the excess of love and enjoyment. Now receiving financial support from the French ambassador, I did not know whether to be ashamed or embarrassed.
Well, soon thereafter, Casanova has never met MM nor CC again, but because soon thereafter he was arrested.
It was prompted not so much by the affair with MM and Caterina, but more the fact that Casanova had been making fun of a distinguished poet, influencing young noblemen, owning forbidden books, and for being a Freemason. Casanova was hauled up in front of inquisitors at the Doge's palace.
Casanova has lived on his streets all his life, encouraging persons into debauchery, orgies, young girls, and married women, and extracting money from Senator Bragadin, stating that he was a nobleman, cheating at gambling, and being in contact with foreigners of the Republic of Venice, which is forbidden. He has practiced magic, the Kabbalah, and possibly the black arts. He is anti-religious. He said that those who believe in Christ are weak. He's greedy, gluttonous, a lecher, a crook. Oh, a manner to inspire horror in all decent citizens.
On the 24th of July, 1755, 30 armed men descended on Casanova's rooms, confiscated his books on magic, astrology, and erotic art, and arrested him. On the 12th of September, he was taken before the Inquisition and found guilty of public outrages against holy religion and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Casanova was marched to the prison under the leads, so called because the roof was made of giant plates of lead. Casanova found himself in a cell where he could not stand upright. He had no table, chair or bed, just an empty bucket and a shelf to lay his clothes. He slept that night on a cold stone floor and woke to find himself freezing. He was informed he could buy himself a bed and table, but no mirror, razor or paper. Rats the size of cats prowled at night, and he had to buy his own food.
He nursed me back to health.
Senator Bragadin went to the Inquisition and got down on his knees, but they would not reprieve the sentence. Casanova began to think about an escape. No one had ever succeeded in ever breaking out of jail. He found a piece of black marble while he was out on a daily walk. With it, he sharpened a spike, which he'd also found. For 8 hours a night, he cut a hole through boards and stone terrazzo. During the day, he covered his nightly work with his mattress. But one day, the jailer Lorenzo announced that he'd be moving to a larger cell. This was a disaster, for the hole was discovered and Casanova was guarded closely from there on. But the spike was saved and hidden in the upholstery of the seat. Casanova continued to try and find a way of escaping. He had noticed that the guards checked the floor and the walls regularly, but paid no attention to the ceiling. So the ceiling would be the only possible escape route, and Casanova planned it in detail.
In order to get his ceiling pierced, he had to make sure that the only thing he had to do it with, a spike, would arrive in the cell next to him.
He had been exchanging books with a monk named Balbi in another cell. They corresponded in Latin by little notes in the books that went back and forth. Balbi was willing to help.
And he thought up a very clever thing. He had asked to buy a big Bible in a new edition that had just appeared, which was quite large. And he had thought, put this spike in the back of the book and hope that that the guard won't see it. But the spike was a bit longer than the book was. There was another problem. So he thought up something that if the guard would carry the heavy big Bible to Balbi and the other door, he would have no time to look at what he really held. And so he ordered 2 plates full of macaroni with a lot of sauce from the restaurant. And they were brought in, and the guard said, well, why 2 of those things? And he said, well, we have to celebrate something with Balbi. I want to give him a present. So I'm eating one here, and he will eat one there, but you have to bring it to him. And also, I have a book which I borrowed from him, and which has to go back. So would you please bring this to him? And the guard had been receiving bits of money every now and then, so he was quite willing to do things. The guard got the Bible with the spike in it in his hands, and on top of it, this dish of macaroni full of sauce. So we had to be very careful not to spill anything. And with that, he went to the other cell and gave it to Balbi. And he didn't notice the piece of iron inside. That's the way the apparatus for the flight arrived in the next cell.
So with the help of Casanova's spike, Balbi would have to break through the ceiling and lift the plank above Casanova's head. The plan succeeded.
they found themselves in the open air, looking at the domes of San Marco. They saw a dormer window further along the roof, past the prison section. They broke through the window, lowered themselves to the floor, broke through doors, and finally reached, through an archive of offices and conference rooms, the main exit downstairs, which was locked and could not be opened from the inside.
That was locked, and it was so heavy that you just couldn't break it without a saw and without a big hammer and that sort of stuff. So they decided to wait there till someone would open it up from the outside. Casanova put on whatever he had on, nice clothes, and he had some, but were summer things, and it was midwinter. So when he got finally outside, while waiting for someone to open the door, and just to run out and say, I was locked in here, well, he didn't say anything. They ran out to the piazzetta and to the gondolas that are still waiting there for clients. Shivering in his light clothes, jumped into a gondola, said to the gondolier, get another gondolier. I want to have a fast drive to Mestre. I need another gondolier, another motor. He got one, and he put the last money he had on the floor of the gondola. They saw they were not being treated, and they started rowing him. By then, Venice was still an island. By now, there is a dike. You had to take the gondola. Went to the mainland, and there, in the early hours of the next morning, they tried to go on foot as far as they could. And of course, they were scared like hell that somebody would follow them and that word would go around that there was a breakout from the prison. And as a matter of fact, it was the first time that anyone broke out of this incredibly well-guarded prison. Casanova decided to split with Balbi. He said, well, they know that two people have fled. We have to go each our own way. Let us meet there and there and try for ourselves to get out of this country. And one night, he was very tired and exhausted, and he just went to a house and asked if he could have any food or any shelter. And there was a lady who looked at him and was compassionate. Well, do come in, have something to eat, have a bed for you. What happened? And he said, well, I've been chasing and on hunting, and during the hunt I was wounded, fell off the horse, and he slept there for, I believe it was for 2 days, not knowing that this was the house of the chief of police, who wasn't there, who was searching for Casanova in the fields somewhere. Marvelous story, and I believe it was right. This is very Casanovistic, going for the danger and live under the protection of danger. Well, anyway, he went up to the north and came out of the Venetian state, which wasn't that big. The rest of his exile story starts because from here on he is 18 years on the run.
When Casanova arrived in Paris, he stayed with his friend Belletti. He arrived within the week of the attempted assassination of the king by Robert Francois Damiens. Casanova watched from his window as Damiens was pulled by 4 limbs, but he couldn't watch the final stages of the gruesome execution. He
hired a window to be able to watch it, to be, front row, sit front row. They were standing front row. And he invited a lot of ladies there, and a friend of his, Tireta. They did things. Tireta was standing behind one of those fashionable ladies who was leaning out of the window, And then while Damien was crying and horses were tearing him apart, must have been terrible, Casanova says, I had to shut my ears. But his friend Tireta didn't shut his ears. And instead of it, he thought this lady in front of me, leaning over out of the window, I'll get her skirt a bit higher and a bit higher. And the lady didn't say, but the lady just kept looking and was fascinated by what happened in front of her, but also fascinated probably what happened behind her.
Later that evening, after the execution, Casanova went to dinner with Belletti and his 17-year-old sister, Manon. She was far more in love with Casanova than he was with she. She wrote him many adoring love letters.
One of the girls from Casanova was Manon Belletti. We know a lot about her. He met her first through her brother. In Milano, he met Antonio Belletti, who helped him in a fight that happened there. And when Casanova came to Paris, he was received well by Antonio, who was one of the children of the Belletti family. That was a real theater family. Sylvia, the mother, and the father, and a little girl, 16 or so, Manon Belletti.
Good night, my darling. I am dying of sleep. My pen is falling from my hands. My eyes are closing. There are so many more things I would like to tell you, but I can't. I'm half asleep. Good night, my friend. Love me well and forever. If you want to make me happy, you will burn these letters. I dream that you're telling me you love me.
Of this Manon, there are a lot of letters because Casanova found it quite easy to be friendly with this nice little girl, and Manon was thinking of big love, marriage, and so on. I don't think Casanova had time for that because he was in the middle of all sorts of affairs, also with the Madame Dufay affair and so on. But her letters, and he has kept some 40 or so of them in the archive, bound together once with a little pink piece of thread. This Manon writes very, very amorous letters. My dear friend, my husband, my dearest Giacometto. And, well, I find the letters boring because they are always just explaining her sighs of when shall we really be man and wife. And Casanova apparently responded a bit in that direction, but he was far too busy.
Casanova decided to try his hand at commerce, opening up a factory for dyeing silk. He employed 20 girls aged between 18 and 25. And of course, as usual, Casanova could not make a clear distinction between private life and business. And one by one, the entire female workforce underwent thorough inspection. And because Casanova paid so well for his overtime, none of them seemed to object. But for poor Manon, she was desperately in love with Casanova and wrote him many passionate love letters.
When a woman yields to love, she should not be conquered before she has fought with her own desires. She should not give way to the first impulse of lustful desire and abandon herself to the first man who takes her fancy.
A pearl of wisdom from the maestro.
Unless, of course, the first one happens to be me.
Why do me the injustice of believing that any slander is capable of freezing the never-ending tenderness I feel for you? Oh, my dear Giacometto, you are a little in the wrong to become so miserable with such little reason. My letter may well have worried you a little, but we are true friends, and you must never suspect that your Nana would ever fail to love you. For all that, I don't want to claim myself completely blameless. I am guilty, because I have upset you. I am ready to make all the amendments you want. But once more, it is melancholy which is the author of my letter, not me. But my dear Casanova, my dear Giacomo, lover, husband, friend, whatever you want to be called, you must believe that I live you with my whole being. You represent my life. I can only love for you. No slander, gossip, or jealousy can in the least diminish the gentle feelings I have for you. It is with great impatience that I await the time when we shall be united. The time when I give myself to you shall mark the beginning of my life. The only thing I regret is that I am separated from that object which I adore more than myself. I would be happy to die in your arms, secure in the fact that you love me. I only regret that I cannot give you more.
Manon's family took a very realistic stand. They loved Casanova, but in the meantime were looking for a steady husband with a regular income. In the end, they decided to take advice from a matchmaker who came up with the perfect candidate, the architect Blondel. Casanova was in Amsterdam when he received the letter from Manon announcing their marriage. Casanova was horrified and very sad by this news. He thought up many projects of punishment and revenge, but in the end decided to forget about her and travel on, although he did carry her love letters with him. He travelled by coach across Europe, having many astonishing encounters.
In that section of the history, Madame Durfey comes. She is someone very much interested in chemistry, Kabbalah. She had a laboratory in her basement where a fire was burning for years and years already. They were looking for the philosopher's stone in those days. Mrs. Durfey, very rich lady, wanted to become reborn as a boy. Well, to me that is something that is quite difficult to perform, but Casanova said, well, if she wants it, we'll do it. And well, there's a lot of theater around Madame Durfey, but what Casanova really wanted was her money. And well, he says this was not a nice thing to do, but she asked for it. And if people want to be deceived, why don't you deceive them? Mundus ful decipi, ergo decipiatur.
In Paris, Casanova met a girl at the Italian Theatre Company. Her name was Giuliana Wynne. He had known her from Venice. She was secretly engaged to a good friend of Casanova's named Andre Memo. Giuliana was also pregnant, probably by Memo. To Casanova, Giuliana had been more than just an acquaintance.
She needed, well, a nice position, so she apparently had decided, I'm going to look for an old, rich man. And she found one in Paris, an old, let us say, a minister of finance, Monsieur de Popelinière, who liked young girls, who was a widower himself, and who got in touch with Justiniana and liked her very much. They even were talking about a wedding already, but...
I am pregnant. And I shall kill myself if I am found out. It is now 5 months.
Justiniana couldn't have this pregnancy because this rich man wouldn't marry a pregnant girl. He thought she was a virgin.
No one knows. And the very author of my misery has been kept in the dark. But I will not be able to deceive the world much longer. Save me, if it is still possible. And if you know how.
I will. I promise you I will.
They went together after the opera ball to a midwife, to an abortionist, and tried to get her help. But that didn't go well.
It occurred to Casanova that it was very imprudent of him, bringing Gusniana to this shady midwife at the dead of night. Suddenly, he wanted to leave. He left 2 louis on the mantelpiece and left, taking Gusniana with him. Madame de Uffay was also informed and looked inside her chemistry books for a prescription, but to no avail.
Casanova found a convent for her, just like with CC, a convent where she could be put away very quietly. Nobody would know about her, and, well, she had just disappeared from the world. This happened, and Casanova was suspected to have put her away. So the police interviewed him. Mr. de Popelinière interviewed him. Justiniana stayed in this convent until she gave birth to a son. And when her body was in good shape again, she started writing to her mother saying, now I'm ready to try again. This was the story of Justiniana at that moment. And in the end, she tried again and succeeded in marrying another old rich man who was so kind to die in a year or two. And she was later on the more or less respected lady, Countess Rosenberg. While in Paris, Casanova also met again the man, Mr. Berny, the eye behind the whole in watching himself, and who has become Minister of Foreign Affairs in the meanwhile. He goes to visit him, and this helps him to get around in high circles in Paris. He finds out that the French finances are in big trouble. There's war with England, and nothing really moves. It's a sort of a standstill. And the state is looking for new ways to get money there. Casanova has just met 2 brothers, Calzabigi, who have a plan for a national lottery. And he has heard something about it, but doesn't know exactly what it is. But he has heard enough in order to tell these French ministers, are you looking for money? I know a nice way. There's a good way to start a national lottery. And who is going to pay the winning money? I'll tell you. So he went out, found the brothers Calzabigi again, and talked to them and heard more about the project. So much that he thought, I feel confident to tell them. So he went back to his high government friends and told them the general outline of this lottery.
And the French controller agreed to finance Casanova's idea. By the end of the first month, Casanova had netted a profit of over 50,000 as a national lottery director. Casanova despaired of his adventures on the continent. He wandered for a time in southern France and Italy, but on the 11th of June, 1763, he was on his way to London. He needed a new playground where people knew nothing about him.
Well, England is different in every respect from the rest of Europe. Even the country is a different aspect, and the water of the Thames has a taste peculiar to itself. Everything has its own characteristic, and the fish, cattle, horses, men, and women are of a type not found in any other land.
I had some difficulty when I first arrived at Dover.
Well, English customs officers are rude. Our French counterparts are much more polite. However, the island of England, it's of a different color than anything you will find on the continent. I had come here to interest the British establishment in a state lottery. But I had been informed that the man I wished to see the secretary to the Treasury, was on his deathbed. The Duke of Bedford had kindly given me an introduction to Madame Cornley.
Another nice and, well, more or less, moving letter, really, if you see it, in the archives is by a certain Sophie. Sophie was the daughter of Madame Cornelis. But who was Madame Cornelis?
So nice to see you, my lord.
Delighted to see you.
When she was young, she lived in the same quarters as Casanova in Venice. Teresa Imer, her name was. And she was one of the early girlfriends of Casanova. They liked each other, they loved each other. We know so because Casanova writes in his memoirs that one day Senator Malipiero, the rich man in the neighborhood where they both lived, found both Casanova and Teresa in bed together. And of course, he was chased out. And then we hear a long time nothing about this Teresa. In the meanwhile, she has been married to a certain Pompeati, and there were children. And then Casanova, when he is in Amsterdam, goes to a concert and finds that one of the singers is a certain Madame Tranti, Mrs. 30, who is traveling all over Holland, giving concerts as part of bigger concerts, sometimes as soloist, in The Hague, in Rotterdam, and in Amsterdam. He is sitting in at one of the concerts in Amsterdam, and there apparently she didn't get any money to perform, but she had the right to pick up money from the people sitting in the concert hall. And she didn't do it herself, but she had a little girl with her who went around with the hat. And when the girl came to Casanova, he looked at her and thought, that is me. And she looked at him and recognized apparently also something. And Casanova said, this is my daughter with Teresa Imer. Wonderful story. And he finds her again in England, because in the meanwhile, Teresa and the little girl, Sophie, and a boy went to England. They took on the name of a Dutchman they had met in the meanwhile, Mr. Cornelis. And in England, she went around as Mrs. Cornelis. She was quite an enterprising lady. She gave balls, and she rented a big hall, the Carlisle House, and gave balls there for the common people. Balls were ordinary things for the nobility, but the common people didn't have a place like that, and she made one. Wonderful.
We got to London in the evening and stopped at the house of Madame Cornelie, as Therese called herself. Her maiden name was Ima. She was married to the dancer Pompeati, who'd committed suicide at Venice by ripping up his stomach with a razor.
To our return. Yes.
That evening I met the cream of London society. Mrs. Cornley, however, refused to invite me to her bed. The Duke advised me to advertise for a young lady after I rented a house, which I duly did, in Pall Mall.
He placed an ad in the London Daily Advertiser. A single lady, with or without servants, immediately accommodated with a genteel, elegant, furnished first floor, with all conveniences to which belong some peculiar advantages, is agreeably situated in Pall Mall. It was not a common lodging house, more for the sake of company than profit. He rented the room to a young Portuguese lady, reading her erotic poetry, and before long seducing her, but soon tiring of her. His life was taken over by a chance meeting of the most beautiful young lady, named Marianne de Charpion. But he was to learn later that her real name was Alsvega, and she was the former mistress to the Italian ambassador Morosini.
Her family Casanova had met before, and in fact owed him 6,000 francs.
The name Charpion reminded me that I was the bearer of a letter for her, and drawing it from my pocketbook, I gave it to her, saying that the document ought to cement our acquaintance. The Charpion, who was well known in London, and I believe is still alive, was one of those beauties in whom it is difficult to find any positive fault. Her hair was chestnut-colored, and astonishingly long and thick. Her eyes were at once languorous and brilliant. Her skin, faintly tinged with a rosy hue, was of a dazzling whiteness. Her features were of that exquisite sensibility which gives so much charm to the fair sex. But nature had given her a beautiful body and a deformed soul. This siren had formed a design to wreck my happiness even before she knew me, and as if to add to her triumph, she told me as much.
Come and dine with us tomorrow.
I cannot do so. I'm expecting Lord Pembroke to dinner.
Will you be alone?
I expect so.
I am glad to hear it. You will see my aunt and myself appearing on the scene.
Oh, well, let me give you my address. I should be delighted if you'll come and join us.
She took the address, and I was surprised to see her smile as she read it.
Then you are the Italian who put out that notice that amused all the town.
I am.
They say the joke cost you dear.
Quite the reverse. Resulted in the greatest happiness.
But now that the beloved object has left you, I suppose you are unhappy.
I am, but there are some sorrows that are so sweet they are almost joys.
Ask my aunt if I may take some rooms in your house.
Why? Do you want to lodge cheaply?
I don't want to lodge cheaply, but I should like to punish the audacious author of that notice.
How would you punish me?
By making you fall in love with me, and then tormenting you. It would have amused me immensely.
Then you think you can inspire me with love, and at the same time form the dreadful plan of tyrannizing over the victim of your charms. Such a plan is monstrous, and unhappily for us men, you do not look like a monster. Nevertheless, I'm obliged to you for your frankness, and will be on my guard.
Then you must take care never to see me, or else all your efforts will be in vain.
As the Charpion had laughed merrily through the whole of this dialogue, I took it all as a jest, but I could not help admiring her manner, which seemed made for the subjugation of men. But though I knew it not, the day I made that woman's acquaintance was a luckless one for me. As my readers will see, it was towards the end of the month of September 1763 when I met the Charpion, and from that day I began to die.
Casanova's wanton desires had led him to the seduction and spoiling of 2 nuns from the convent on the island of Murano.
You will see that you are in the wrong, dearest, and that far from despising you, my dear friend loves you only.
Casanova retired to MM's room, where MM and Caterina were waiting, the French ambassador to join them later.
He is anti-religious!
Of course, they were scared like hell that somebody would follow them and that word would go around that there was a breakout from the prison.
When a woman yields to love, she should not be conquered before she has fought with her own desires. She should not give way to the first impulse of lustful desire and abandon herself to the first man who takes her fancy.
Save me, if it is still possible. But I should like to punish the audacious author of that notice.
Propriety is often far from proper.
Be gone! I should have become madly in love with you.
Take care. She will do all in her power to entrap you.
I loved her, or was it desire? Love turned to lust.
This accusation is a groundless calumny.
Farewell. Until 3 o'clock.
Tomorrow morning, I shall ask you to come with me before the magistrate.
I could kill myself this instant. I would that she had never known me.
Casanova's Casanovan's wanton desires had led him to the seduction and spoiling of 2 nuns from the convent on the island of Murano.
You will see that you are in the wrong, dearest, and that far from despising you, my dear friend loves you only.
Casanova retired to MM's room, where MM and Caterina were waiting, the French ambassador to join them later.
Encouraging persons into debauchery.
Of course, they were scared like hell that somebody would follow them and that word would go around. There was a breakout from the prison.
When a woman yields to love, she should not be conquered before she has fought with her own desires. She should not give way to the first impulse of lustful desire and abandon herself to the first man who takes her fancy.
Save me, if it is still possible. But I should like to punish the audacious author of that notice.
Propriety is often far from proper.
Begone! I should have become madly in love with you.
Take care. She will do all in her power to entrap you.
I loved her. Or was it desire? Love turned to lust.
This accusation is a groundless calumny.
Farewell. Until 3 o'clock.
Tomorrow morning, I shall ask you to come with me before the magistrate.
I could kill myself this instant. I would that she had never known me.
Nevertheless, I'm obliged to you for your frankness and shall be on my guard.
Then you must take care never to see me, or else all your efforts will be in vain.
And who, pray tell, shall be joining us?
Well, you're going to like this. La Charpillon and her aunt.
Really? I once took a violent fancy for the little hussy. It was one evening when I was at Vauxhall, and I offered her 20 guineas to come with me on a little walk in a dark alley. She said she would if I paid the money in advance, which I was fool enough to do. She went with me, and as soon as we were alone, she ran away. And I could not catch her again, though I searched the whole evening through.
You should have boxed her ears before everybody.
No, I should have got into trouble, and people would have laughed at me besides. I preferred to despise her, and the money too. You in love with her?
No, but I am curious, as were you.
Take care. She will do all in her power to entrap you.
I look forward to her trying.
And so, my friend, do I.
Don't be ridiculous.
She came in and went up to my lord with the most perfect coolness and began to chatter away to him without taking any notice of me. She laughed, joked, and reproached him for not having pursued her in Vauxhall. Her stratagem, she said, was only meant to excite him the more.
Another time, I shall not escape you.
Perhaps not, my dear. For another time, I shall be careful not to pay you in advance.
Oh, fie. You degrade yourself by talking about paying.
Oh, I suppose I honor you.
We never talk of such things.
Lord Pembroke laughed at her impertinence while she made a vigorous assault on him, for his coolness and indifference piqued her. She left us soon after dinner, making me promise to dine with her the day after next. On the day appointed, my evil destiny made me go to the Charpions. The girl introduced me to her mother, whom I had once recollected, although she had aged and altered since I had seen her. In the year 1759, a Genevan named Bellome had persuaded me to sell her jewels to the extent of 6,000 francs, and she had paid me in bills drawn by her and her two sisters on this Bellome. But they were then known as Arnsberger. The Genevan became bankrupt before the bills were due, and the three sisters disappeared. As may be imagined, I was surprised to find them in England, and especially to be introduced to them by the Charpion, who, knowing nothing of the affair of the jewels, had not told them that Seingold was the same as Casanova, whom they had cheated of 6,000 francs.
I am delighted to see you again.
I recollect you, sir, that rogue Bolam.
Please, we will discuss that subject another time. I hear you were ill.
I have been at death's door, but I am better now. My daughter did not tell me your proper name.
Yes, she did. My name is Sengal as well as Casanova. I was known by the latter name at Paris when I first made your daughter's acquaintance. Although I didn't know at the time that she was your daughter.
I was fascinated. I thought I would be on my guard and be safe, and as I only wanted the daughter, I looked on all else as of a little moment. The only thing which annoyed me was that the Charpion, after apologizing for having made me sit down to such a poor dinner, invited herself and all the company to sup with me on any day I liked to mention. And at midnight I went away, ill-pleased with myself, but with no purpose of amendment, for this sorceress had got me in her foils. All the same, I had the strength of mind to refrain from seeing her for 2 days. And on the third, which was the day appointed for the cursed supper, she and her aunt paid me a call at 9 o'clock in the morning.
I have come to breakfast with you, and to discuss a certain question.
Will you tell me your business now or after breakfast?
After breakfast, for we must be alone.
We had our breakfast, and then the aunt went into another room, and the Charpion, after describing the monetary situation of the family, told me that it would be much relieved if her aunt could obtain 100 guineas.
What would she do with the money?
She would make the balm of life, of which she possesses a secret, and no doubt she would make her fortune too.
She then began to dilate on the marvelous properties of the balm, on its probable success in a town like London, and on the benefits which would accrue to myself, for of course I should share in the profits.
I will give you a decided answer after supper.
I then began to caress her and to make assaults in the style of an amorous man, but it was all in vain. She gave me her hand and said,
Farewell, till this evening.
I saw that I should get nothing out of her without spending 100 guineas, and I determined not to attempt to bargain, but I would let her understand that she must make up her mind not to play prude. The game was in my hands, and all I had to do was to take care not to be duped.
It seems to me you don't seem very anxious to hear my reply.
You have made up your mind, I suppose.
I have. The 100 guineas are at your disposal.
Then please to give the money to my aunt. Otherwise, people might think I got it from you by some improper means.
I will do so.
You will get nothing from me, either by money or violence. But you can hope for all when I find you really nice and quiet.
As documents have to be executed, it might take some time.
Won't you fix the time?
The time depends entirely on you.
When my hateful guests were gone, I began to reflect and came to the conclusion that the young adventuress had determined to plunder me without giving me anything in return. I determined to have nothing more to do with her. But I could not get her beauty out of my mind.
In less than 3 weeks, I congratulated myself on having forgotten the Sharpion and on having replaced her by innocent amours. Such was my condition when, one morning, the favorite aunt of the Sharpion paid me a call and said that they were all mystified at not having seen me since the supper I had given them, especially herself, as her niece had given her to understand that I would furnish her with the means of making the balm of life.
I would have gladly given you your 100 guineas if your niece had treated me as a friend. But she refused me favours a Vestal might have granted, and you must know she is by no means a Vestal.
Don't mind my laughing. My niece is an innocent, giddy girl. She loves you, but she's afraid you have only a passing whim for her. She's in bed now with a bad cold. And if you will come and see her, I'm sure you will be satisfied.
These artful remarks, which had no doubt been prepared in advance, ought to have aroused all my scorn, but instead of that, they awakened the most violent desires. I laughed in chorus with the woman and asked what would be the best time to call.
Come now, give one knock.
Very good. You may expect me shortly.
I congratulated myself on being on the verge of success. For after the explanation I'd had with the aunt, and having, as I thought, a friend in her, I did not doubt that I should succeed. I put on my greatcoat, and in less than a quarter of an hour, I knocked on their door.
Come back in quarter of an hour. She's been ordered a bath, is just going to take it.
This is another imposture. You're as bad a liar as she is.
You're cruel and unjust. And if you'll promise to be discreet, I'll take you up to the 3rd floor where she's bathing.
Very good. Take me.
She went upstairs, I following on tiptoe. She pushed me into a room and shut the door upon me.
The Sharpion was in a huge bath, with her head towards the door, and the infernal coquette, pretending to think it was her aunt, did not move and said,
Give me the towels, Aunt.
She was in the most seductive posture, and I had the pleasure of gazing on her exquisite proportions.
Be gone!
You needn't exert your voice. I'm not going to be duped.
Be gone!
No. Give me a minute to collect myself.
My aunt shall pay dearly for this.
She will find me her friend. I won't touch you. So show me a little more of your charms.
More of my charms?
Yes. Put yourself as you were when I came in.
Certainly not! Leave the room!
I've told you I'm not going. And that you needn't fear for your virginity, we will say.
She then showed me a picture more seductive than the first, and pretending kindliness said,
Please leave me. I will not fail to show my gratitude.
Seeing that she got nothing, that I refrained from touching her, and that the fire she had kindled was in a fair way to being put out, she turned her back to me to give me to understand that it was no pleasure to her to look at me. However, my passions were running high, and I had to have recourse to self-abuse to calm my senses. I was glad to find myself relieved, as this proved to me that the desire went no deeper than the senses. The aunt came in just as I had finished, and I went out without a word, well pleased to find myself despising a character wherein profit and loss usurped the place of feeling. The aunt came to me as I was going out of the house and inquired if I were satisfied.
2 weeks later, Casanova sent a note to Charpion's mother, offering to pay 100 guineas for the services of her daughter for a single night.
Sir, is it a fact that you told my mother that you would give 100 guineas to spend the night with me?
No, not to spend the night with you, but after I'd passed it. Isn't the price enough?
No jesting, sir, if you please. There's no question of bargaining. All I want to know is whether you think you have a right to insult me, and that I'm going to bear it.
If you think yourself insulted, I may perhaps confess I was wrong, but I did not think I should have to listen to any reproaches from you. I could not address you directly, as I know your arts only too well.
I shall not pay any attention to your abuse of myself. I will only remind you of what I said, that neither money nor violence were of any use, and that your only way was to make me in love with you by gentle means. Show me where I have broken my word. It is you that have forsworn yourself in coming into my bathroom and in sending such a brutal message to my mother.
No, you needn't bother to weep. I knew the source of those tears. It is defiled.
You know nothing of it. I love you, and it is hard to have you treat me so.
You love me? You have not taken the best way to prove it.
As good as way as yours. You have behaved to me as if I were the vilest of prostitutes, and yesterday you seemed to think I was a brute beast, the slave of my mother. You should have written to me in person, and without the intervention of so vile an agent, I should have replied in the same way. And you need not have been afraid that you would be deceived.
Supposing I had written, what would your answer have been?
I should have put all money matters out of question. I should have promised to content you on the condition that you would come and court me for a fortnight without demanding the slightest favour. We should have lived a pleasant life. We should have gone to the theatre and to the parks. I should have become madly in love with you. Then I should have given myself up to you for love, and nothing but love. I am ashamed to say that hitherto I have only given myself out of mere complacence. Unhappy woman that I am. But I think nature meant me to love. And I thought when I saw you that my happy star had sent you to England that I might know the bliss of true affection. Instead of this, you have only made me unhappy. You are the first man that has seen me weep. You have troubled my peace at home, for my mother shall never have the sum you promised her, were it for nothing but a kiss.
I am sorry to have injured you, though I did not intend to do so. Only I don't know what I can do.
Come and see us, and keep your money, which I despise. If you love me, come and conquer me like a reasonable and not a brutal lover. And that will help you. You cannot doubt that I love you.
All this seemed so natural to me that I never dreamed it contained a trap. I was caught, and I promised to do what she wished, but only for a fortnight. She confirmed her promise, and her countenance became once more serene and calm. The Charpion was a born actress. She got up to go, and on my begging a kiss as a pledge of our reconciliation, she replied with a smile, the charm of which she well knew, that it would not do to begin by breaking the terms of our agreement. And she left me more in love than ever, and full of repentance for my conduct.
That very evening I began my visits, and judged from my welcome that my triumph was nigh at hand. But love fills our minds with idle visions and draws a veil over the truth. The fortnight went by without my even kissing her hand. And every time I came, I brought some expensive gift which seemed cheap to me when I obtained such smiles of gratitude in exchange. Besides these presents, not a day passed without some excursion to the country or party at the theatre. That fortnight cost me 400 guineas, at least.
Please excuse me if this question is rather pertinent, but will Charpillon be spending the night with me here or at my house?
We will settle this matter after supper, if that is an agreement with you.
I made no objection, not liking to tell her that in my house the supper would be more succulent and a better prelude for the kind of exercise I expected to enjoy. When we had supped, the mother took me aside and asked me to leave with the company and then to come back. I obeyed, laughing to myself at this foolish mystery, and when I came back I found the mother and the daughter in the parlor, in which a bed had been laid on the floor. Though I did not much care for this arrangement, I was too amorous to raise any objection at a moment when I thought my triumph was at hand. But I was astonished when the mother asked me if I would like to pay the 100 guineas in advance.
Oh, fie!
Exclaimed the girl, and her mother left the room. My amorous feelings, so long pent up within my breast, would soon find relief.
Wait for me in bed.
She put out the candles. I complained of this act of hers, but she said she could not sleep with the light shining on her. I began to suspect that I might have some difficulties thrown in my way to sharpen the pleasure, but I determined to be resigned and to overcome them all. When I felt her in bed, I tried to clasp her in my arms, but found that she had wrapped herself up in a long nightgown. Her arms were crossed and her head buried in her chest. I entreated, scolded, cursed, but all in vain. She let me go on and answered not a word. At first I thought it was a joke, but I soon found out my mistake. The veil fell from my eyes, and I saw myself in my true colors, the degraded dupe of a vile prostitute. I was utterly depressed. She was so irritable with me, but I decided that I wanted to give up the girl, demanding my money back. But I could not sleep. I loved her, or was it desire? Love turned to lust. I wanted to kill myself. I had a plan to put balls of lead in my coat pockets and throw myself off a bridge.
It is from this point that Casanova dates the decline of his life. There were among the papers at Dreux 2 letters from Marianne de Charpillon and a manuscript outlining the story of Casanova's relationships with her and her family.
I know not, monsieur, whether you forgot the engagement Saturday last. As for me, I remember that you consented to give us the pleasure of having you at dinner today, Monday, the 12th of the month. I would greatly like to know whether your ill humour has left you. This would please me. Farewell, in awaiting the honour of seeing you. Marianne de Charpillon. Monsieur, as I have a part in all which concerns you, I am greatly put out to know the new illness which incommodes you. I hope that this will be so trifling that we will have the pleasure of seeing you well and at our house today or tomorrow. And in truth, the gift which you sent me is so pretty that I know not how to express to you the pleasure it has given me and how much I value it. And I cannot see why you must always provoke me by telling me that it is my fault that you are filled with bile, while I am as innocent as a newborn babe, and would wish you so gentle and patient that your blood would become a true clarified syrup. This will come to you if you follow my advice. I am, monsieur, your very humble servant, Marianne de Charpillon.
Driving home in his carriage, just as he entered Pall Mall, a voice was heard crying, "Good night," sang out. Casanova put his head out of the window to reply, and was horrified to see in an instant that the carriage was surrounded by men armed with pistols. Asking what they wanted, he was told that they were to take him to Newgate, and that he would hear of what his crime was when he arrived in prison. After much arguing, the head constable relinquished, and agreed to take Casanova to a house and place him under house arrest.
We stopped before the house, and I was placed in a large room on the ground floor, furnished solely with benches and long tables. My servant sent back the carriage and came to keep me company. The 6 constables said that he could not leave and told me that I should send out for some meat and drink for them. I told my servant to give them what they wanted and to be as amicable with them as possible.
You were very generous to your keepers.
Indeed. I had not committed a crime. I was quite at ease. I knew that my arrest must be the effect of a slander. And as I was aware that London justice was speedy and equitable, I thought I should soon be free.
A long and tedious night.
I amused myself by reflecting on my rapid, passage from a numerous and exalted position to the vile place I now occupied, though I was still dressed like a prince. At last the day dawned, and the keeper of the tavern came to see who the prisoner was. I could not help but laugh, but when he saw me, he began to curse the constables for not waking him when I came. He had lost the guinea I should have paid for a private room. At last news was brought that the magistrate was sitting, and I must be brought up.
Still in your finery?
Exactly. A coach was summoned, and I got into it. For if I had dared to walk along the streets in my magnificent attire, the mob would have pelted me. I went into the halls of justice, and all the eyes were at once attracted to me. My silks and my satins appeared to them as the height of impertinence.
At the end of the room, I saw a gentleman sitting in an armchair and concluded him to be my judge. I was right, and the judge was blind. He wore a broad band around his head, passing over his eyes.
Signor Casanova, be kind enough to step forward. I wish to speak with you.
Eccomi, signore.
Signor de Casanova of Venice, you are condemned to perpetual confinement in the prisons of His Majesty the King of Great Britain.
I should like to know, sir, for what crime I'm condemned.
Your demand is a reasonable one. For with us, no one is condemned without knowing the cause of his condemnation. You must know, then, that the accusation charges you with intending to do grievous bodily harm to the person of a pretty girl. And as this pretty girl aforesaid goes in dread of you, the law decrees that you must be kept in prison for the rest of your days.
This accusation is a groundless calumny. To that I will take my oath. It is very possible indeed the young girl may fear my vengeance when she comes to consider her own conduct, but I can assure you I have had no such designs hitherto, and I don't think I ever shall.
She has 2 witnesses.
Then they are false ones. May I ask your worship the name of my accuser?
Miss Chapillon.
I thought as much. Sir, I have never given her aught but proofs of my affection.
Then you have no wish to do her bodily harm?
Certainly not.
Well, then I congratulate you. You can dine at home. But you must find 2 sureties. I must have an assurance from the mouths of 2 householders that you will never commit such a crime.
Who shall I find to do so?
2 well-known Englishmen, whose friendship you have gained, and who know you are incapable of such an action. Send for them, and if they arrive before I go to dinner, I will set you at liberty.
Grazie, signore.
The constable took me back to prison where I passed the night, and I gave my servants the addresses of all the household I recollected, bidding them explain my situation, and to be as quick as possible. They ought to have come before noon, but London is such a large place. They did not arrive, and the magistrate went to dinner. I comforted myself with the thought that he would sit in the afternoon, but I had to put up with a very disagreeable experience.
The chief constable, accompanied by an interpreter, came to say that he must go to Newgate. This was a prison where the most wretched and abject criminals were kept. Casanova signified to him that he was awaiting bail, and that he could be taken to Newgate in the evening if it did not come. But he only turned a deaf ear to the petition. The interpreter told him in a whisper that the fellow was certainly paid by the other side to put him into trouble, but if he liked to bribe him, he could stay where he was.
How much will he want? The interpreter took the constable aside and told me that I could stay where I was for 10 guineas. Then say I should like to see Newgate. Newgate. A coach was summoned and I was taken away. When I got to this abode of misery and despair, a hell such as Dante might have conceived, a crowd of wretches, some of whom were to be hanged within the week, greeted me by deriding my elegant attire. I did not answer them, and they began to get angry. The jailer quietened them, saying I was a foreigner and did not understand English. And then he took me to a cell, informing me how much it would cost me and of the prison rules, as if he felt certain that I would be there for a very, very long stay.
But in the course of half an hour, the constable who had tried to obtain 10 guineas out of him told him that Bell had arrived and his carriage was at the door.
Senor Casanova, please to sign your name for double the amount, and you will then be a free man again.
At last, after one of the most tedious days I had ever spent, I returned home and I went to bed laughing at the experience I'd undergone. A lucky escape. Indeed. A few days afterwards, as I was walking and idling about, I passed a place called Parrot Market. Parrot Market? Parrot Market. And as I was amusing myself by looking at these curious birds, I saw a fine young one in a cage. And I asked what language it spoke. Italian, French, whatever. And they told me it was quite young and did not speak at all, yet. So I bought it for 10 guineas. I thought I would teach the bird a pretty speech, so I had the cage hung by my bed and repeated dozens of times every day the following sentence. Champignon is a bigger whore than her mother. Champignon is a bigger whore than her mother. Champignon is a bigger whore than her mother. Champignon is a bigger whore than her mother.
Casanova quickly recovered from these torrid events. The time eventually came for Casanova to leave London and head back across Europe. He swore that he would never greet England's shores again.
Casanova sailed back across the Channel exhausted. He spent 2 weeks in bed and was bled by a doctor. Senator Bragadin sent him funds totalling to thousands onto Antwerp. Stopping off at Tournai, Casanova bumped into an old acquaintance of Madame de Uffay.
Oh, yes.
His name was Saint-Germain.
He had a score of retorts before him full of liquids in various stages of digestion. He told me he was experimenting with colours for his own amusement. Then we spoke of Madame d'Urf.
She poisoned herself by taking too strong a dose of the universal medicine. And her will shows that she thought herself to be with child. If she'd come to me, I could have made her really so. It's a very easy process. But one cannot be sure if the fruit be masculine or feminine.
Then he showed me his magistrum, which he called étude. It was a white liquid contained in a well-stoppered phial. He told me that this liquid was the universal spirit of nature, and that if the wax on the stopper was pricked ever so lightly, the whole of the contents would disappear. I begged him to make the experiment. He gave me the phial and a pin, and I pricked the wax, and lo, the phial was empty.
It's very fine, but what good is all this?
Well, I cannot tell you. It's my secret.
This was in his usual style of arrogance to which I was accustomed. This was the last time I saw this celebrated and learned impostor. He died at Schleswig 6 or 7 years after.
My apologies. Good sir.
Casanova headed onwards towards Germany and stopped at Wolfenbüttel at the Herzog August Bibliothek, at the time one of the finest libraries in Europe. It was there he came across Alexander Pope's translation of Homer.
Casanova began translating the Iliad. He translated it into Italian. This was his first major literary adventure. Bruised by his recent encounters, he withdrew into himself and became into a more contemplative state of mind. But it wasn't long before the feeling of adventure bubbled up inside him, and he longed for a bigger playground and a new city to explore. As he turned 40, a new chapter of his life began.
Casanova, in search of a new job, also came to Berlin. And as he used to do, he tried to start high up and really was able to have an interview with Frederick II, Frederick the Great, who was a a cultural king. He was playing flute, he was writing poetry, he liked the French language and culture very much. He had invited Voltaire at his court. On the other hand, he was very cross with the French politics. This was a time that Madame Pompadour was really directing the policy of France in the rest of the world. And he didn't like her at all in that position. And he gave proof of that by naming his little dog Pompadour. So every time he loved to say, "Come here, Pompadour." Casanova aimed at getting a job in the army of Frederick. King Frederick had a real regiment of nice, tall people, hoping to impress the world with that. So Casanova was hoping to get a position in teaching these cadets something of life in the world, but he didn't get the position.
Casanova took a carriage and hired 6 horses to embark on his journey to Russia, but like Napoleon, he crossed Europe in the bitterly cold winter. Snowbound and icy, he crossed Poland and western Russia to arrive in Moscow and finally to the gates of the city of St. Petersburg.
We know, in the meanwhile, who did get the position, and it was the one who has written Baron von Münchhausen, with the book of traveling through the world by grabbing a cannonball and let yourself be shot. So Casanova missed to be Baron of Münchhausen himself.
Casanova arrived in Warsaw on the 10th of October 1765. He at once found his way to the court of King Stanislaus Augustus, King of Poland. He fascinated the king with stories of his adventures and the Kabbalah. It was perhaps Casanova's final attempt to get inside royal purses, for which he had a certain skill.
I must tell you of an event which took place toward the end of January. It was in fact a dream. As I think I've confessed to you before, superstition has always had some hold on me.
Yes.
Well, I dreamt I was at a banquet, and one of the guests threw a bottle at my face. The blood poured forth, and I ran my sword through the enemy, and jumped into a carriage and rode away. The very next night, Prince Charles of Courland came to Warsaw and asked me to dine with him at Prince Paninsky's, the same that was so notorious and was afterwards proscribed and shamefully dishonored.
Yes.
His was a hospitable house, and he was surrounded by an agreeable family. I had never called on him before because he was a persona non grata to the king and his relations. But in the course of the dinner, a bottle of champagne burst, and a piece of broken glass struck me just below the eye. It could have veined, the blood gushed forth, over my face, over the clothes, even over the cloth.
Good heavens.
Everybody rose, my wound was bound up, the cloth was changed, and the dinner went on merrily, but I was struck between the similarity of that and my dream. Although I was happy about the differences, I didn't have to kill anybody, but all those events came to pass just 1 month later.
Casanova attended the theatre with the king. He was fascinated by a dancer named Madame Casacci. He went backstage to speak to her, kissing her on the cheek. Unfortunately, though, she already had a lover.
Casanova was famous for 2 things. He fled from the Leads in Venice and for his duel in Warsaw with Count Branitzky. Branitzky was Francis Xavier Korczak, and he had 1 year before Casanova met him become Count Branitzky. He was ambassador of Poland to Berlin. He was in the army. He was a high-ranking man of very recent nobility, but he was a real count. And the point that made Casanova so famous was not so much that he won or lost a duel, but that he, as someone who was not of nobility, who was in a real duel with someone from nobility. This crossed the border, and that was important. Casanova used to say of himself, "I'm nothing, I'm a zero. I have no nobility, but that's why I'm free."
Well, absolutely divine.
Thank you.
Just as I embraced her, who should enter but Brunitsky, whom I had left a moment before with Madame Benetti. He had clearly followed me in the hopes of picking a quarrel.
Seems to me I've come at a bad time. Looks as if you love this lady. Certainly, my lord. Thinks not your excellency her as worthy of love? Oh, quite so. As it happens, I love her too. And I'm not the man to bear any rivals. As I know that, I shall love her no more. Then you give her up? With all my heart. For everyone must yield to one as noble as you are. Very good. I call a man that yields a coward. Isn't that a rather strong expression? You Venetian coward. Perhaps a Venetian coward might kill a brave Pole outside the theatre.
Without awaiting a reply, I left the building by the chief staircase. I waited vainly outside the theatre for a quarter of an hour with my sword in my hand. At last, half perishing with cold, I called my carriage and drove to the Palatines, where the king was to sup.
Don't worry, I'm not come to assassinate you, merely to say I accept your proposal, on condition only that the duel must take place today. If not today, never. That is out of the question. I have letters to write and I have business to do for the king. That will do afterwards. In all probability you won't fall, and if you do, I'm sure the king will forgive you. Besides, a dead man need fear no reproaches. I want to make my will. Come. You needn't be afraid of dying. There'll be time enough to write your will in 50 years. But why should your excellency not wait until tomorrow? Because I don't want to be caught. You have nothing of the kind to fear from me. I dare say. But if we don't make haste, the king will have us both arrested. How can he? Unless you have told him of our quarrel. You don't understand. Look, I'm quite willing to give you satisfaction, but it must be today or never. Very well. This duel is too dear to my heart for me to allow you any pretext for avoiding it. Does your excellency intend on spending the spring in Warsaw?
I had thought of doing so, but you may possibly send me to pass the spring somewhere else.
Oh, I hope not.
Have you seen any military service?
Yes. Why do you ask?
No particular reason. It was only for the sake of saying something.
We had driven about half an hour when the carriage stopped at the door of a large garden. We got down and, following the postoli, reached a green arbor. In it was a stone table on which the footman placed 2 pistols, 1.5 feet long, with a powder flask and scales. He weighed the powder, loaded them equally, and laid them down crosswise on the table.
Choose your weapon, sir.
Is this a duel, sir?
Yes.
You cannot fight here, sir. You are within the ban.
No matter.
It does matter. And I, at all events, refuse to be a witness. I'm on guard at the castle. You have taken me by surprise.
Be quiet. I will answer for everything. I owe this gentleman satisfaction, and I mean to give it him here.
Mr. Casanova, you may not fight here.
Then why have I been brought here? I will defend myself wherever I'm attacked.
Put the matter before the king, and you shall have my voice in your favor.
I'm quite willing to do so, General. If His Excellency will say he regrets what passed between us last night. I came to fight, not parley. General, you can bear witness that I have done everything in my power to avoid this duel.
I swear upon my honor your weapon is a good one. And I will try its goodness on your head. Fire, sir.
I was not in a position to let him kill me at his ease, so I suddenly aimed and fired on him, just as he fired on me.
Scoundrels! Have some respect for a man of honor. You have killed me, so make haste away, as you are in danger of the gibbet. The duel was fought within the ban, and I am a High Court officer and a Knight of the White Eagle, so lose no time. And if you have not enough money, take mine.
Thanks, it will be useless to me. If I'm guilty, I'm content to lose my head. I hope your wound will not be mortal. I'm deeply grieved that your having obliged me to fight.
The ball had pierced my hand by the metacarpus under the index finger and had broken the first phalanges. Its force had been arrested by a metal button on my waistcoat, and it had only inflicted a slight wound on my stomach close to the navel.
Casanova left England and travelled across Eastern Europe, having escaped imprisonment at Newgate and the duplicitous scheming of the Sharpion.
I have come to breakfast with you, and to discuss a certain question. Don't mind my laughing. My niece is an innocent, giddy girl.
So show me a little more of your charms.
More of my charms?
Your demand is a reasonable one.
You'll get nothing from me.
Superstition has always had some hold on me.
Snowbound and icy, he crossed Poland and Western Russia.
Seems to me I've come at a bad time. Looks as if you love this lady.
Casanova used to say of himself, I'm nothing, I'm a zero, I have no nobility, but that's why I'm free.
But having narrowly avoided death in the duel, Casanova was no longer safe and once again had to move on.
I could kill myself this instant.
I should blame him for doing so.
She is too good by far for a poor wretch like me.
He ought to escape by all means, if only to save his life for my sake.
The stupid fellow has played me shall cost him dear.
What you show me there is monstrous.
She was naturally of a passionate disposition.
Casanova left England and travelled across